Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysAdmin. And thank you. News, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to tonight's episode of the Iron Sysadmin podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and I'm joined tonight by one of our usual co-hosts, though I don't think we've seen him since before the holidays. Jason. Say hi, Jason.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, Jason. And we have a special guest tonight, Mr. IT Guy Eric, or Eric the IT Guy. Which is it? I've seen it both ways now.
So the handle is IT Guy Eric, and it just I go by Eric the IT Guy. In fact, some folks that know me know that I do some things for work, which we'll get into here in a minute. Were shocked to know that I actually do have a last name. I just don't tend to advertise it.
You have a last... Well, I know you have a last name because, you know, whatever, we've talked. But, you know.
It's, in fact, not IT Guy.
It's not IT Guy? That's not your last name? That'd be a great last name.
Right.
Well, no, that would actually be a terrible last name. because think of all the questions you'd get. You're the IT guy, right?
Actually, funny enough, that's how I got the handle.
That I'd believe it. I'd believe it. All right. So do you want to give a quick intro, and then we'll hop into our main topic, which I think is going to be a little enjoyable.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of the early years of my career as a systems administrator. I'd followed the same path that a lot of us have. I started out as an intern on the help desk, where I spent my days kicking printers and throwing broken keyboards across the room. If they weren't broken before, they were definitely broken after.
Yeah.
But started out on the help desk, worked my way up into just general systems administration, translation. I created and deleted tons and tons of Exchange email inboxes. And then I found out that there's this really cool thing called a Linux server. And so I started to kind of tinker with those. And as I kind of transitioned in my career, people were like, "Hey, we've got like these 6 Linux boxes. Just give them to Eric. He knows what the matrix kung fu is that you have to use in order to make these things work. We're just not going to touch them." So in 2011, I took a chance and doubled down on Linux systems administration. I took a job as a full-time Linux systems administrator. I got my Red Hat certified systems administrator, my RHCSA certification. And that was probably the best gamble of my entire career. I spent about just shy of 7-8 years as a full-time Linux systems administrator, dedicated. These days, other than rebooting a Windows box, I know nothing about Windows. So that was a great turning point in my career. Was someone asked me, "Hey, can you go fix something in the registry?" And I could just say, "No."
I don't know that. Yeah, I can't fix it any better than you can.
Right, I don't speak that language anymore. Sorry. So then I got a job at GitLab for about a year. I transitioned out of operations, started doing more with the open source community, started hanging out at Linux Fests and that kind of thing. Was in pre-sales at GitLab for a year, and then I joined the team at Red Hat, and was a telco solutions architect, so pre-sales there for a little while. And then I got the dream job of dream jobs, working for the Red Hat Enterprise Linux BU in the marketing department. So these days, I'm a senior technical marketing manager, which is a big fancy title of I talk to other sysadmins about how RHEL and how Red Hat can really help not get those 2 a.m. phone calls to reboot a Linux box when it's actually somebody's database query. True story. That actually happened. I got paged at 2 a.m. because the server was slow. Turns out that it was actually a database query that they put one too many asterisks in. And yeah.
The asterisk is a dangerous thing in SQL queries.
Right. So it's like, yeah, fix your query. I'm going back to bed.
Yeah. So for those of you that aren't aware, right? I mean, like obviously, I work at Red Hat. I know this stuff. Eric works at Red Hat. Jason, you've been exposed to enough Red Hatters to know this, but when Red Hat puts the word technical in front of a title, they mean it. It's
right.
not technical marketing manager is not like a fluffy sales title. Like every technical marketing manager I've come across knows their stuff. They've been there. They've been in the trenches. So Eric is here because I chatted with him a little bit internally. He's been, I guess you've been on a little bit of a quest to sort of get some certain, I'm not going to say messaging out there, but just to be more involved with this type of community. He found our Discord community, which, completely unprompted. Like, I had met Eric before, but he just showed up one day and I'm like, "Hey, I think I know you." And we started talking and like, maybe we'll have you on the show sometime. And then, believe it or not, Mark, who couldn't be here tonight, came up with this great topic that we were mulling over. He had to bail because he has some home improvement stuff going on, and it just wasn't compatible with recording a podcast. But the topic for tonight is how basically the role of a systems administration has changed in the past. I mean, I'm saying decade, but we'll probably go back at least a little further than a decade. My own personal experience goes back almost 2 decades, probably a little more than 2 decades. Part of it as a hobby, then part of it as a career. But I don't want to bore everybody with a big, huge, long timeline. So we're going to kind of gloss over some of the early days because they aren't quite as relevant, although they're good history to have, right? But anyway, it seemed like a great show to have Eric on. We may have him on for something else, some other topic in the future. I don't know. We'll see. You know, maybe you guys don't like him and you don't want him back. I don't know.
I don't know if Jason likes me. He keeps rolling his eyes.
Well, I mean, you mentioned GitLab. Jason is the first person I've known of to deploy GitLab, and he still has it up and running. That's probably like what, 6-7 years you've been running that thing. I don't know if that's exactly.
I've been on and off running GitLab since it was announced, and then the past probably more like 7 or 8 years. Every place that I've worked, I've brought GitLab in and stood it up because it's just hands down like the best out there.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it's like the concept of a self-hosted GitHub is essentially what it solves, right? And that's pretty cool, right? So,
yeah, it's an amazing product, an amazing community, and it was a really fun job too. I actually didn't think I'd ever leave GitLab, but then a friend of mine, Brandon, gave me a call one day and said, "Buddy, I need your resume like right now." I was like, why? He goes, a job came open on my team. We were kind of kicking around ideas, and you'd be perfect for it. So you need to put in your resume to Red Hat right now. Like, well, okay, Red Hat's not going to hire me. Whatever. And then, that was 2 years ago. And so here I am working for the BU, and Brandon doesn't ever cease to remind me that it was his prodding that got me into that position. So that was actually leaving GitLab was one of the hardest decisions I ever made in my career, but it definitely paid off, and I keep contact and keep in touch with what's going on over at GitLab, and like you, I do try and convince people to, if we're going to do a RHEL lab, let's use GitLab. Just forget that other site.
Yeah, right. That other thing with Git in the name. All right. So anyway, might as well get into the topic at hand, right? So, Jason, feel free to throw in commentary as I try to gloss over the early days of sysadminning and kind of where the role came from, right? Because this isn't stuff that I've lived through necessarily, but it's stuff I can remember, right? So back in the early days when you had like mainframes and whatnot, you had this guy or maybe team of people called the system operators, right? And they were the folks who basically kept the mainframe going and made sure that users could do the things they needed to do on the mainframe, right? When there was an issue with the mainframe, you'd call the system operator. And that name carried over to things like the BBS era. The sysop was always the guy that you'd go to. He was the guy that was running the guy or girl, I suppose, that was running the system operator, right? And then as that matured into sort of enterprisey and sort of a broader title, you weren't just the mainframe guy anymore. System administrator came along, and I don't know where that shift exactly was, but when I got into the field, system administrator and network administrator were the two most common job titles for someone who was sort of getting into that field, right? So the term sysadmin was born, right? And sysadmins, as anyone who's listened to this show, I hope would know, are the folks that run anything from your mail server to your Linux box to your cloud stuff to maybe they just manage your printer and make sure that things are working properly. The term sometimes gets blended with other roles. Like I worked at one place where I was technically a network administrator, even though most of my job was systems. But I was responsible for anything from the network switches to the WAN links that we had set up to the Windows machines to the Linux machines to the freaking building's air conditioner, right? It's just everything, right?
I think they just called it the IT guy.
I just called that the IT guy, but you had to have a title, right? So,
well, and to be honest, a lot of the sysops and early sysadmins that I learned about servers from were actually just converted electrical engineers. They're like, hey, you ran the power into the data center for all these big things that we don't understand. So you know electronics. So certainly it'd be nothing for you to manage the operating system that sits on top of the hardware, right?
You know these computer things, right?
Yeah. Whenever I touch the back of this thing, lightning bolts come out, and you like lightning bolts, so you must be able to control this. It's yours now.
And we can't talk about system operators and system administrators without talking about the old series of short writings called "The Bastard Operator from Hell," which is somewhat based in truth, right? sysadmins and systems operators got this sort of persona going where they were the no. They were the people that said no. They were the people that told you couldn't do things. They were the people that told you, that basically made your life hell. Even if they weren't necessarily true, they had that image, right? And that's unfortunately kind of the image that people have when they think about the guy who's running things, the guy who has to keep the systems running. And a lot of times the reasoning behind that stuff is not because we want to tell you no, but it's because maybe you've got a bad idea and someone has to tell you no, right? And the guy who's going to get
possible.
The guy who's going to get woken up at 2 a.m. when your bad idea goes south is the guy that's going to tell you no.
And it's amazing how many of those stories tie in with the whole electrical engineer end of this.
Right.
Oh yeah, right, totally.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go read them. They're hilarious.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
pretty sure that the author worked at a few places that I did, because some of those stories just hit too close to home to be humorous.
I guess it's possible, right? So, yeah.
And like most systems administrators or sysops or whatever term we're using for our jobs today, I have never ever done anything that could be construed as a bastard operator from hell story.
Oh yeah, never. Not a once. Not a once.
Yeah,
No,
it
I
was-
mean, to be completely honest, I've always tried to be the sort of administrator that enables good things, right? But you always have to eventually come to a no, right?
Mhm.
Like, can you make it do this crazy thing? I mean, I could, but who's going to support it? Oh, you are. No, I can't do that thing. So, that's sort of, you almost, in today's world, that's almost like ancient history, right? That role that I just described, the guy who basically through sheer wit and knowledge manages all of your things by hand, right? Is, if you could imagine a day where we didn't have things like playbooks and we didn't have automation, at least not like you know it today. The closest thing we had to automation was some crafty bash scripts or Perl scripts. Remember Perl?
Oh yeah.
You might have individual tasks written up into some kind of a script, but there was still some guy that executed that, made sure all the right input was in, checked to make sure that it was done at the other end, right? And that has really changed over time, and that's really, all that to say, that's what we're going to talk about tonight, right? So, the earliest thing I can remember that really started to transform the role was the ability to automatically build systems. And that's kind of the first bullet point I have in our list here. And what came to mind for me was things like Kickstart, but then it occurred to me there were also products like Norton Ghost that would do things like you could take a machine, maybe it was a desktop, right, and clone it to another one, whether it's from drive to drive or from a CD, believe it or not, a single ISO that you plop into into a computer and image. Maybe it was even floppy before that. I don't know. Is that even realistic? Floppy ghost images? I don't know. Maybe.
You
Probably
could
not
you could
ghost drivers for sure.
Yeah.
and I think you can almost argue that installers for applications are a part of automation as well, because
Right.
Yeah.
If you go all the way back to, I don't know, like Commodore, TI, etc., there were no installers. It was, you had to load it, know how to run it, or else you were lost.
Yeah. Right. You had a floppy
Manually
disk.
compiling.
Oh yeah. Right. You're compiling stuff. I mean, that's even. Right. So I guess you could say that. I'll allow it. I'll put it that way. But Kickstart is the thing that comes to mind because Ghost was, you'd install a system, you'd configure it in a certain way. That was like your gold standard. And then you'd use Ghost to image that onto whatever removable media you were going to then write it to other machines with. And then you'd have like a boot disk, and it would clone bit for bit that data. It wasn't on the fly. It wasn't, you couldn't change it. It was an image, right? A disk image. Kickstart was, you'd install a system and you'd end up with a text file. And that text file could be used to duplicate that. But it wasn't like an image. It was, I have a Kickstart file that defines my sane config. I can edit that Kickstart file. I can change it as time goes on, right? And when I want to build a new system, I plop in the disk with that Kickstart image in it, right, along with the OS install media, and it'll reinstall the system, which is a very slight nuance, right? It reinstalls versus just imaging. It reinstalls using the config that's in that Kickstart file. And you can do things like change how you want the disk laid out. You can do things like change what packages get installed. You can have different Kickstarts for different scenarios, right? It's not like an image where it's kind of, I'm not going to say immutable. There's certainly ways to edit an image. They're not as clean as Kickstart. So that, in my mind, is kind of the beginning of where it started to become easier to deploy systems, and and then it opened up the door to making it easier for automating other things, right? And the timeline that we've got laid out here isn't like necessarily a strict timeline. I have it broken up into categories, so if we jump around here, don't call us out like, oh, no, Puppet came before virtual machines. You can't talk about that later. Anyway, the next thing I wanted to touch on was virtual machines and virtual sprawl, right? So did you guys have anything else you want to talk about in the sort of build automation world?
Well, I was really excited when you mentioned Ghost, because that was one of the first projects I ever had as a actually even before my systems administrator days. I worked for a municipality here in Kansas City, and I was the desktop support guy, and one of my tasks was regularly to re-image Windows XP machines, and I can remember, and I'll add a war story in just for laughs, but I remember being handed this project and thinking just it was infrastructure as code before that was even considered a term, because we had this base image, but we had to break down the images by model number. So we had Optiplex for desktops, we had Latitudes or whatever the laptop was at the time, but we had multiple images, and come to find out, you could actually like pre-package all the system drivers that were in your fleet into the image. Makes for a little bit bigger image, but when everything's on stored drives and that kind of thing, and in the network backbone, then you don't really care what's on the end user system. And the funny part is that we got our Ghost system working so well that I was not only able to catch up on that desktop refresh project, but actually have like loaner systems ready to go. The only problem was that our workbench, we'd set up desktops and laptops down the length of the workbench and run a USB cable for mouse, keyboard, and then Ethernet cable to get on the network. Our network administrator misconfigured the switch that was in the workbench. And so what Ghost would do is, when you started an imaging session, would actually multicast onto a network. And if your workbench switch is on the same network as the rest of your city network, you might accidentally take down the city network because you're setting up new laptops. So we've very quickly identified that system or that error and fixed it.
That's ugly.
Yeah, everybody was running around the IT office going, what is going on? What process is running? And I come just walking out of the workbench and just go, did
What's
you
going on, guys?
Yeah, why is the red light on? And it was like, I just kicked off a couple of laptop images, no, nothing big. So sure enough, we pulled the plug and everything worked again.
Yeah, weird. So you touch on a really good point, though, right? And this is kind of the point I think I was trying to make, but didn't really drive home, is that build automation meant that instead of tying up your sysadmin or your desktop admin, in your case, right, with babysitting an install, they could now kick off 3 or 4 of them, walk away, take down the city's network, in your case, and go do more productive things, right? There's always, and we've talked about this on this show before, years ago, we talked about automation and how a lot of sysadmins were like, oh no, automation's going to put us out of a job. Well, no, automation's going to let you do more important things, right? Sure, if you want your job to be standing in a cold data center at a keyboard and mouse trying to install the next server or the next 20 servers, whatever you're trying to deploy, then yes, it's going to ruin your job. I'm sorry. You can't stand there and watch a blinking cursor. You're going to have to go do something else. But this was kind of a game changer, right? And people realized that, I'm assuming, and kept building on that. And that's what sort of tells the rest of our story here, right? So on that note, right? So the next thing that I threw in here was virtual machines, right? I think this was revolutionary for the type of work we do as sysadmins, right? And it's led to so many other revelations, right? So as a sysadmin who remembers before we had VMs, or at least before VMs were enterprise ready, right? Because I can remember toying with VMs way back at the beginning of my career, and it was just a fun thing, right? Like, oh, look, I can run a DOS machine inside of my Windows machine, right? But whatever. No one thought about doing that in the enterprise, right? Well, so servers were all, you had a physical server, and you put an OS on that server. And that server, if it was your quote-unquote web server, it might have a dozen websites on it, right? And all of those websites could break all the other websites because one piece of bad code could take the whole system down, and 12 websites are now down, right? And we didn't really have isolation. Yes, there were things out there to try to isolate them from each other from a permissions perspective, but we didn't have true process isolation in the way that you can with a virtual machine. A virtual machine one machine can be a fiery wreck right next to another machine that is perfectly fine and running within the same physical hardware, right? Which is just kind of a game changer, right? Without the automation systems like Kickstart, building a bunch of VMs quickly would have been just as difficult as building a bunch of physical servers before we had Kickstart, right? You'd be standing there installing. It's a lot easier to clone a VM, of course, than it is to clone a physical machine. You don't need an extra utility. Most hypervisors have the ability to clone a disk right built into them. But this was a big deal. And I don't know if there's people watching or listening that do not remember days when we did not have VMs, but it was truly a game changer. We went, I was working at the college that both Jason and I worked at when virtualization really started to take off. My job before that, I was just sort of tinkering with it. It was a really neat idea. We had just started deploying some virtual systems. We didn't have anything close to a cluster or anything. But when I got to the college, they were just at the beginning of their virtualization journey, right? They had a couple of standalone Zen machines and a VMware box or two. Nothing was clustered yet. And that was all just like that was like the next big thing that we were doing. And I got to be part of that. I got to be part of building and designing that stuff. And it was actually a lot of fun. But we went from, there was a machine called, I think it was Web 2. You can guess, it was the second web server that was ever built at the college, right? It ran all of the college's web presence, one machine. If that one machine went down, if there was, the network cable got unplugged accidentally, or if, one piece of code took down that particular server, the whole web presence was down, right? So that's a bad thing. Anyway, I'm going on and on here. Virtualization enabled so many things like, for instance, cloud. The cloud, we've joked about it, someone else's computer, right? Well, that someone else's computer is a bunch of virtual machines that are positioned in a way that they're easy to spin up and down, and you can do it through a fancy little web interface. That's all the cloud is. Yes, there's a bunch of cool technologies around it. But at its core, that's what the cloud is, right? So virtualization here not only enabled the redundancy of being able to take a server and make it redundant in a way that it can be migrated between machines and whatever, but it also enabled technologies like the cloud, right? So any virtualization stories we want to talk about before we move on? Did you take down the city's network with a VM?
I was just going to say, virtualization, in addition to all you said, virtualization really took advantage of and allowed you to pull all of the resources out of a given piece of hardware, because
right.
Any single piece of hardware, even today, any single piece of hardware, it's hard to run to have something that's going to use all of the resources that are available to that machine. And VMs and more technologies today allow you to sort of split that up, where you may have 8 CPUs in the machine, but the app that you're running is only ever going to use one. So now you can run 8 VMs, lock them to CPUs, and run 8 instances of that application 8 times as fast.
Well, and to your point, when collect my thought here for a second. Uh, to your point, when you have like two web servers, and that may be fine on weekends or after dark or even through 11 and a half months out of the year. But if you're running a college or something, the couple of days when registration first opens up and your systems are just getting pounded and pounded and pounded day after day, with hardware, you have to actually buy all the hardware, have it sitting there, and all those systems sit basically idle most of the year, except for those few days when you really need them.
Yep.
Virtual machines, and especially as we get into kind of the next iteration of what this looks like, where you can dynamically spin resources up and down as needed. You no longer had to build infrastructure for the 120% of your normal load. Instead, you could just you could just cluster all of your hypervisors together. They shared a pool of resources, and we did not take down the city's network with a virtual machine. But I do remember that was the first place where I saw clustered hypervisors built, or a cluster of hypervisors together. Because I can remember even back then that this virtualization thing is pretty cool. It's fun because we can try out different versions of this operating system or of this application. We could maybe we can build something and hand it to a developer and have them develop on this, and then we can throw it away. But
Right.
this will never be production.
Right.
And then after a while, it's like, oh, we could use this for production for like our utility boxes or maybe for monitoring software, but never for our money making application. It's not technically possible.
Yep.
And then the last holdout that I recall was DBAs. I had a DBA that was going to swear to his grave that you cannot run a production database on a virtual machine. I'd love to ask him how that turned out for him, but the first time that I saw, and I've been tech savvy. I mean, I figured out, as 6 years old, I figured out how to change the wallpaper on my dad's Macintosh 2. Sorry, his Apple II.
Yeah.
And so I've been tech savvy, and even for someone who plays in technology outside of his day job, even the first time that I saw vMotion, basically that was VMware's fancy term of saying we're going to take this running virtual machine and move it over to this hypervisor. It was so awesome. I will never forget standing around this guy's cube and watching as we kick off the vMotion process. And so it's running on hypervisor A, and then it moved over to hypervisor B, and we literally had a ping running on against that server the entire time.
Yep.
It never dropped a packet.
Yep.
I mean, for what, 2006, 2007? This was amazing. It didn't drop a packet. You barely saw it change in latency as the process was moving. It was so awesome. And just immediately, all the systems administrators in the room were like, "Well, we could do this, and we could offload this, and we could." And then when you started talking about P2V, it's like, "Hey, that 15-year-old 6U box that the secondary power supply goes out every other Thursday for who knows what reason. We could take that and virtualize it, and we can save the instance until we can replace the actual data that's on the system, and we could get rid of the hardware." It opened up so many doors, and it was amazing to see how resistant people were to that. And I think we're kind of seeing a little bit about that now. But I don't want to move us too far ahead. But I mean, I got to watch that transition from everything's hardware to 80% of everything is virtualized.
Yeah, we're going through a similar thing now with a whole new technology, and some of you probably know what we're leading to. But that the story about migrating a VM and watching ping, I have an exact, literal identical story, except instead of VMware, it was Red Hat Cluster Suite and Zen.
Nice.
Right? Same deal, right? Let's try to migrate a VM. Okay, start the ping. We're watching the ping. Is it done yet? Oh yeah, it's been done for 2 minutes. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. It was like, did you kick it off?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, dude, it's been done, and I checked my email.
Yeah.
One of the other benefits was being able to snapshot things so that you could run your you set up your server, meticulously create exactly what you need, and you snapshot it.
Yep.
and then you run your experiment. You blow the thing to smithereens, completely destroy the entire operating system. It's completely useless. Push a button, and you're back at the beginning
Yep.
instantly.
Yep.
And that, as opposed to prior to that, physical servers, blowing those up, it was like, okay, I'm going to be offline for the next 4 hours while I
Get the
reimage this thing.
coffee.
Yeah,
Can someone
Coffee,
bring me
grab my-
dinner? I'm gonna be here late.
yeah.
Grab
I mean,
my
the
grab my
number of
iPod.
systems that I've had to reimage over my career because of just nonsense
Oh yeah.
and snapshotting with a V. I mean, yes, there's backups and you can restore from backup, but it's
yeah.
still an arduous process.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being able to snapshot a VM periodically and just kick back to it almost instantly is
Yep.
kind of an amazing thing, and it's
Yep.
great for local development.
Yeah, well, I mean, it used to be that backups were that. Now backups are a piece of that puzzle, right?
Mhm.
Backups still serve a very valid use case, but snapshotting is great.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I'm about to go
Yeah.
into a big upgrade. I'm going to take a quick snapshot. I'm going to start my upgrade. Oh, man, everything's on fire. All right, when was that snapshot taken? 8 hours ago?
Mhm.
I feel like that was an eternity ago. Can we just go back to that? I have to figure out what happened, right?
Patch Tuesday.
Yeah, right.
When Patch Tuesday came around, you were reading the release notes on one side of your monitor. On the other, you had snapshots of all your production boxes. That way, when Microsoft inevitably broke something in Windows Server,
That won't happen.
granted-
What are you talking about?
granted, this is Windows Server 2003, and
Yeah.
but I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right?
Apparently, you were managing Windows servers around the same time that I was.
Yeah, and I'm glad to say that 2008 was the last time I ever touched a Windows box.
Yeah, I
Patch
think I had
Tuesday
one
and
or,
Restore Wednesday.
I had like 1 or 2 08
Restore
boxes to
Wednesday.
deal with. Yeah, Restore Wednesday.
Nowadays, it's like Patch Tuesday and 0 Day Wednesday is the
Right,
because once they drop their patches, they're not dropping anything else for a month. So that now all of the new 0 days come out the day after.
Yep, the stuff that they didn't fix in the last patch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if you had this this concept at the university, but to your point, Jason, when you need a backup the most, about 2 hours after Iron Mountain comes and picks up your tapes that hold the backup that you need. That's when you need the backup. It's on a truck on its way to a vault somewhere.
Well, fortunately for us, we had data centers across the campus, so we just shoot backups back and forth. No Iron Mountain involved. But I have been the job that I had before the college. We had a situation where and this sort of proved the exception to the rule on backups. It was an NTFS file share. I had written. I was an engineer, but I was basically writing white papers, and I had written, I don't know, dozens and dozens of white papers, and they're all on this file share. And somehow the file share got corrupted. Not the files per se, but the NTFS, the actual NTFS
Metadata or something.
metadata itself got corrupted. So they restored from backup, which also had the corrupted NTFS metadata on it. So that was sort of useless. So we lost all of that, and then they went to the backups, which were offsite. They had to find. I mean, all the backup horror stories. Like it was they couldn't find some of the tapes. They finally found the tapes. They brought them back. 3 of the tapes didn't work. One of them only had some of the data. Yeah.
One
yeah.
had coffee stains on it. They don't know how it got there.
Yeah, we got some of the data back, but of course, all the new stuff. And as a result, my boss was like, "Okay, we're gonna solve this. I have just put in a requisition, and everybody is getting a hard drive that we can connect to their laptop. External hard drive. You will back up your own stuff."
Because obviously we can't do it for you.
Well, so we didn't have ransomware back then, so it was fine.
Yeah,
True.
right. Oh, those were the days.
You really weren't though, because I'm like sharing these stories. I feel my anxiety kicking in here.
Yeah, right. I know what you mean.
These stories hit too close to home, but I think that's what makes the industry and systems administration or SRE or whatever we want to call ourselves these days so important. It is so important to have automation, to have templates, to have blessed images, to have these processes built in so that you don't end up burning out your systems administrators because what I struggled with and what it took me leaving operations to learn was that I was burning out at jobs because this was the reality of what we did. And of course, the part we haven't talked about is when you have the business or your manager or both standing over your shoulder during one of these outages, screaming and yelling, going, "We're losing money. We need to get this fixed."
Yep.
And you're sitting there going like, "I told you we needed to replace the server 6 months ago. The power supply was going bad. You won't let me upgrade our virtualization licensing so we can add more servers. What do you want me to do?" And so you'd work 60, 70, 80 hours. You'd work 8 to 5 Monday through Friday because no one cared what you did on the weekend. You were to be in the office by 8:02 a.m. on Monday morning or you were late. And then you worked all weekend trying to keep things running. And then you got called at Thursday night at 4 in the morning because somebody's business process broke and they got till 8 a.m. that next day to fix it. That's ridiculous. Because didn't we come up with technology to make people's lives easier? And there was a time where I tried to figure out, is this making anybody's life easier? Because it's certainly not making the operators' lives any easier. And I mean, and then you take that burnout from this job, going, well, this company culture must suck, or this company's budget sucks, or my
Right.
manager sucks. That must be the problem, right? So you
It can't
switch
be
to
the
another
job, it must be the people. Yeah.
right? And so you take that to the next culture, you take that to the next company, and that's how you get these really cranky gray bearded guys. It's not because they hate technology; it's because they've done this for 10 or 20 years. Sorry, I'll
Yeah.
get off my soapbox.
Yeah, no, I mean it is. I guess it's inevitable if you're going to talk about system administration over the years. You're gonna run into this exact issue is burnout, right? And it's not just sysadmins. There's a lot of folks in infosec that are all burned out. There's lots of folks in network administration that are all burned out because it's really the same problem with a different set of players, right? So
Right.
a different set of problems and challenges, right? You talked about Patch Tuesday and 0-Day Wednesday, right? Imagine if you're the infosec guy, and that's your job, right? Your paycheck is on the line. That
Mhm.
0-Day Wednesday doesn't leak all your data, right? So right, so and this kind of leads up to like all the technologies that we've talked about to this point still required a guy. I keep saying guy. Still required an admin, a person, right? To manually set up, configure, and administer all these systems, right? So even imagine the virtualization sprawl, quote unquote, that's what they were calling it at the time, that we just talked about, where we went from, okay, I've got a dozen servers in my data center to I've got 50 servers in my data center, 48 of which are virtual, right? I've got 2 or 3 pieces of metal, maybe that database server in the corner. Everything else is virtual, right? All of a sudden, servers are quote unquote free, but you don't expand your administration staff because you've still got only a dozen servers. Why do you need more than more than the guys that were managing it before, right? And that's really just sort of the story of so many IT people, whether they're the sysadmin or the infosec guy or whatever, right? There's never enough budget. You pointed at that yourself, right? There's never enough budget. There's always salaries are always too high, right? They don't want to hire more people. They don't want to put more budget into IT. So you're doing more with the same amount of money as you were always making, the same amount of budget you always had for servers and whatever. And you could argue that a lot of these technologies came about because of that, right? When I worked at that place where I said I was responsible for the air conditioner and everything below it, right? There were 2 of us. We had 100 servers to manage, 100 physical servers to manage. There were 2 of us, right? Yeah, the boss knew what he was doing. I mean, he did start the place, right? He built those first servers himself. But for whatever reason, whether it was because he wasn't interested, whether it was because he was too busy, whether it was because he was a dick, which is what it turned out to be, he didn't manage the servers anymore. It was all on me and my assistant, right? We figured out ways to automate. We figured out ways to script things. We figured out ways. We started tinkering with virtualization because we got tired of driving all the way to work at 2 in the morning, right? A virtual machine as long as the hardware stayed up, and usually it's the software, the OS that crashes, right? As long as the hardware stayed up, we could still get into the thing remotely and reboot it and whatever. That led to things like config management and automation, deployment tools, right? Being able to deploy VMs from, well, I mean, I guess the term was infrastructure as code. Is that still what they're calling it now? I don't know. But the idea would be
that came up after my days
Yeah.
learning Puppet, and then I was like, yeah, this is a great thing, and now we're on to like GitOps or
right,
I don't know, like automate away your systems administration DevSec biz, something like that.
DevSec Cloud Ops, right? Whatever.
And keep in mind, I admitted right at the top of the show that I'm a marketing guy, and even I look at some of these terms that go,
they are kind of
you know,
ridiculous.
it's still just the same guy doing the same job. It's just on GCP now instead of in the closet next to the brooms.
Right, right. So, and what that leads to, right? And I already mentioned it, right? Automation. And I don't just mean build automation. I mean full on, like soup to nuts automation. And we didn't start there, of course. We started, okay, all of our servers get the same NTP server.
Mhm.
Like this is everybody's first automation job. Configure NTP. At least that's my experience, right? It always seemed like that was the example. Okay, everyone needs NTP. So we had tools like Chef and Puppet, and there was a third one at the time, CF Engine. That kind of preceded most of them, I think, right? There was CF Engine, Chef, Puppet, right? And those, I don't know if CF Engine's still around, but Chef and Puppet, I know people are still using. But they paved the way. They were a little complicated. They were hard to write code in, but they got the job done. I probably had 100 little Puppet modules that would do different things when I worked at the college, right? And they were still in place when I left there. Maybe they still are. I don't know. But they would do little stuff like, oh, I need to configure SendMail on all these machines. So I'd set up a little Puppet manifest that said, here's how to set up SendMail. I needed to add certain users to everywhere. Here's some users to add. I needed to set up NTP. I needed to set up DNS. Whatever, right? There were all kinds of stuff. The web servers, Apache had to be set up a certain way. We want to be able to deploy certificates, right? And it just builds and builds and builds until before you know it, when you build a server, it's, okay, kickstart, remember that? Kickstart, lay down an OS. Puppet comes in. Oh, no, Satellite comes in, deploys all the packages.
Get your Pixie server.
Oh, right.
And put your Kickstart file on the network.
Yep.
Which saves you the time of going out with a USB drive and booting into network boot.
Right.
And then go ahead, Kickstart.
Right. So Pixie
You
server.
have your fancy tools.
Yeah, right.
Shell scripts do it.
Pixie
Shell
server
scripts are just fine.
starts
my
your build off.
first sysadmin job, Jason. My first sysadmin job was converting one guy's Perl scripts over to Puppet manifests. So
See, I was converting Bash scripts over to Perl. So
And then Perl into Puppet, and then Puppet into Ansible, right? Yeah.
next everything will be AIML. It'll be fine. Just
Right.
give Skynet your servers. Skynet will take care of everything.
Right. So anyway,
Go
imagine
ahead.
you're a sysadmin, you're doing everything manually. And over the course of however long it took you to figure all this out, you go from, okay, I can kickstart a machine by popping a disk in and waiting 15 minutes for it to boot up and start doing its thing while I go and get a coffee, and then come back and manually configure everything or run my set of shell scripts against it or however I was doing it, right? And by the time I left the college, this is how I had it laid out, right? I had built Satellite, which managed Pixie and managed DHCP in my special build network. I would turn on, and it even talked directly to my VM infrastructure, right? So I'd go into Satellite, I'd say, I need a server, it has to match this config. And then I'd just walk away for 20 minutes. And Satellite would write out a Pixie config. It would talk to Rev, and Rev would turn on a VM based on the configuration I told it to. It would go read Pixie. It would go read Kickstart. It would get whatever OS I told it had to install on it. It would lay that down. Satellite would give it the most recent package set that I had blessed. Satellite would hand it a bunch of Puppet manifests. It would configure all the things. And then I would come back to a server that had to be moved to the proper network, re-IP'd, and maybe one or two manual tasks that had to be done that didn't fit into my build automation. Right? Now, I could do that 100 times a day if I needed to, instead of 2 or 3 times in a shift if I were to do it all manually. Maybe not even, right? I remember I used to take an entire day when I was at that web host to configure one server. Now, they were Windows servers, so be fair. But imagine that, a web host running Windows servers. Can you picture that? Ugh,
Not anymore.
I have nightmares.
Oh gosh, what was Microsoft's solution?
I don't even know.
It crashed all the time.
Was
Wasn't
it-
WebSphere.
There was SCCM was their patch management stuff. I don't know.
No, this was their web server.
IIS. Yeah. We ran IIS. I thought you meant for build automation.
No, SCCM was popular after I left for Linux, and I was like, wait, Linux has had Spacewalk or Satellite for far longer than SCCM has been a thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, and
we
really,
might have
when
nice fancy Windows, but we've got the management stuff.
when I left the world of Windows management, the only thing SCCM was really getting you was you could bring the patches closer to your servers.
Yes,
Right? So
that's
you
all
could
it did.
install them faster because you didn't have to wait for the internet, right, to download them and install them. Otherwise, it really wasn't all that useful.
Well,
I'm sure it's come a long way since.
That was definitely a sysadmin who helped build SCCM because you download the packages ahead of time. That leaves your internet pipe available for you and your buddies to have a LAN party in the office, play Halo 3
While all your
while
Windows
all your
servers
Windows
burn.
servers were booting. I wish I could say that was exaggerated.
Yeah,
It
right.
really wasn't.
Right.
We had an Xbox VLAN at one of my jobs, and that's literally
There's-
what we did on patch night.
There's a reason that the networks were so optimized and tuned and worked so well.
Yeah,
And it
right.
wasn't because of the business applications that were running on that network.
No, it's that frames per second when you're trying to get that kill shot in Call of Duty.
Because
Yeah,
lag
you gotta have
kills,
those-
damn
gotta
it.
have Those low ping times.
Because lag kills. Wow. Chat is crazy tonight, folks.
It is.
On both platforms. A lot of people switched to YouTube because they were having trouble on Twitch. And then we got somebody on, it looks like Quadling's over on Twitch. Quadling, go to YouTube. I'm having trouble watching both chats.
Yeah, Quadling's had a lot of good comments. Yeah, Quadling's dead on. It was 4 people playing on a projector in a conference room.
And
I don't know, Nate. You weren't a part of this because I think you were down in the tech support pit. But
oh
you
yeah,
know, the
I was still
one
in
of
the
the
Moved
trenches.
his
places that
office
we-
down to the furnace room.
one of the places that we worked during lunch, we would take time to play Unreal Tournament and have
yes.
battles, and it was us and the some of the sales engineers and some of the network guys, and of course they're down the hall. So in order for them to hear you, you have to yell. So things got loud, very loud on the second floor, and then occasionally people would forget that they were working. That they were at work, and it would
The
get
salespeople
loud
were
and
like,
vulgar.
"Shut up!
Oh no!
I'm selling
it
a
was,
DS1 over here."
yeah, it was also got a little vulgar there a couple times. So yeah, that lasted a couple weeks, and we were asked to please not do that anymore.
It
That
reminds me of the videos about the internet help desk years ago,
Yeah.
where the sysadmin was playing Halo 2, and he'd pause his game to go and reboot somebody's
oh right,
system.
wasn't it?
or-
It was
or-
like the website is down was the title of that
Yeah,
video,
yeah,
if
yeah.
I remember correctly. No, it's
Yeah,
not
the
down.
website-
Whatever, and he's headshot. Yeah, I remember that. The company Jason's talking about. This was just before I started there. They moved tech support, but I started my career there in tech support, and like a year before that, they had moved to this really nice cubicle farm that they had tech support in. Before that, they were literally in a sub basement that you had to lift a hatch in the floor to get to the call center. It would flood. There was water on the floor. That's where they
You
put
know-
tech support.
I worked there for years before I knew that existed, and then they finally, like, at some point
It was
I had to go
storage.
down there for some reason. It was, yeah, I guess it was storage, and they brought us
Mhm.
down there, and I was like, wow, this place is like crazy.
Yeah,
And they're like, yeah, this is where tech support used to be. And we look around, we're like, you put people in here?
I worked with guys that remembered it. They were like, yeah, we used to be down there. It was right off the break room. There was this hatch on the floor, and I'm up one day I'm in the break room, and someone's like, we used to be down there. I'm like, what?
I can relate. I can relate because I worked at a place where the server rack was the janitor got written up because he used to prop his mop and the mop bucket right next to the server cabinet. You can't make this stuff up.
Was it there we had an outage because the cleaning people actually unplugged a server rack to plug in a vacuum? I forget if it was there or not. I remember that story from somewhere I worked. It's crazy stuff. All right,
And
so
I love how the chat is now just nothing but quotes from the website is down. How long did you say we had? An hour?
Yeah, we're right up at the hour already, but
We started late.
Iron Sysadmin always goes long-winded, especially on such an animated topic.
Oh my gosh.
This.
Oh, I've only been on my soapbox once, so I've been trying to be good.
All right, so that leads, unless anybody had any other stories they wanted to share, that leads
I've got
us
thousands, but sure, go ahead.
that leads us from config management into the glorious world, as the salespeople will tell you, of the cloud. Okay, now we hinted at this earlier. The cloud is nothing but someone else's computer running a bunch of virtual machines. It's more than that, obviously. At its core, the cloud is a bunch of virtual machines running in an orchestrated manner, and that's really the key that makes it a cloud versus just a hypervisor with a bunch of VMs on it, right? And the way you can manage it, the APIs that you can make calls to, turn things off and turn things on, and config and whatever, build and turn off and turn on. And this really led us to, and stop me when you've heard this, cattle versus pets. Right, now this is probably entering the most recent decade of the history that we're talking about here. But I can remember being at, I think it was a Puppet Conf, where the first time I heard that term, and it really was sort of like virtualization was revolutionary, sort of like Kickstart was revolutionary. This was revolutionary, right? All of a sudden, the hand coding, or coding is a loose word here, the hand care and feeding of it. You ever run into that person like, oh, you're a computer programmer, right? No, I'm a sysadmin, totally different job. But you make the computers work, right? You're a programmer. That's why I'm always weird when I say about coding, hand coding. I'm not coding anything. Anyway, all of a sudden, the servers that you cared for so deeply, like pets, are more like cattle being led to the slaughterhouse, right? You spin it up, it does a job, it gets killed and put on the Barbie. Although I wish, man, if servers made beef, that would be awesome. Could you imagine all the dead servers that could turn into steaks? Imagine if they really were cattle. All right, where was I? Right, cattle versus pets. So when... Sorry, go ahead.
And I definitely started out in that time frame because all of our servers had nicknames or they had host names.
Right.
Like at the city I worked in, all the printers were named after presidents.
Yeah.
And so you used to get emotional because there was one box, I don't remember what job it was from, but it was AMCHO, which was whatever it was like the name of the abbreviation for the data center, and it was like home office or something like that. It was a file server that lived for over a decade, and we actually had a retirement party for AMCHO when we pulled it out of the rack and shut it down. In fact, I think the guy that built it was still at the company, and he got like a memory board or just some piece of hardware on this thing and displayed it in his office as long as I was there.
Yeah.
And it used to be just that bad. It's like, we had to put Bucky down because Bucky blew both of its power supplies, and now we got to come up with a new name because our naming convention, there's only so many presidents, or there's only so many comic book characters that we can think of. We get too ridiculous.
We had a server called Reality. So somewhere in this office, I have the processor for Reality.
We had, at the college, we had naming conventions that some of them were based off movie series, some of them were based off TV series. The web guys all used Futurama characters. Right?
Nice.
And, of course, there's only so many characters in Futurama. When one of the web developers... I can't use names on the show, but Jason's gonna know who I'm talking about. There was this one manager. She led the the data management side of things, right? And she and Jason doesn't know this, but at one point we switched offices, and it was like when she left campus and went to this office building, it was like she was a different person, right? And I have a whole different opinion of her since then. So Jason,
I'm sorry, I don't believe you.
you never met her, but when she was still up on campus, she was very proper. She was just a very proper person, right? And everything was very businessy, and everything was very, very proper, right? And one of our web developers, again, this was after you left, Jason. One of our web developers had a project where he had to work directly with her, and the server that he had the server name he had chosen for this project was Hyper Chicken, which is apparently a character from Futurama that I didn't even know about, right? And one day I'm talking to him, I'm like, "Why did you call it Hyper Chicken?" He goes, I wanted to see how long how long she would hold out before she would say that name in a meeting."
There was some of that too.
Yeah, okay. So I know who you're talking about on both sides of that one. I can.
I'm sure you
absolutely
do.
see that.
I'm
Yeah.
sure you do. He had long hair when you knew him.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know exactly who it is.
But it was hilarious. Anyway, but yeah, I remember we had a flat out like war because the web developers were standing up a issue tracker, and they were going to use Redmine, and they wanted to call the server Aragorn because Aragorn is a tracker. Aragorn, and it's an issue tracker, right? So they thought it was perfect. The systems group wouldn't let them because we had claimed Lord of the Rings. They ended up calling it Muldoon, which is the guy from Jurassic Park, the guy who hunted the raptors.
Yeah.
I never even knew his name, to be honest. I couldn't remember his name. They're like, "Oh yeah, it's that guy." I'm like, "Sure, okay." Sure, glad you didn't get Aragorn. I don't know if we ever used Aragorn, to be honest.
Can you imagine what it must be
Just the
like for
point.
business managers to come down to IT planning meetings like this? I mean, but what else? And it's so funny because anywhere I go, whether it's a conference or a meetup or a podcast like this, it's like I meet other sysadmins and we all have similar stories. It's like this is not unusual for systems administrators, for technologists, because what we do is not easy. It is sometimes very, very lonely. And instead of just
stressful.
buckling under, it is very stressful. So
Yeah.
you have to have those things. You have to have those stories to kind of keep yourself sane, to keep yourself combined as a team.
We
But what?
I want to say
What's
we
the-
talked about this on the show once, but there was an article I had read once about how systems administration teams build a similar bond that soldiers do because they
Yes.
go through trauma like that together. It's not the same, obviously. I'm not going to say sysadmins are like soldiers because I'll end up with people complaining. But it's a similar idea, right? Where you deal with trauma together and you build sort of a bond, right? Anyway, Jason, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, what's the modern equivalent of this though? Because you don't name servers anymore. Now they're I-173526 that existed for 2.3 seconds yesterday at 2 o'clock in the morning, and has gone through 900 iterations since then because they're all cattle. Like there's no naming of that stuff anymore.
It
So-
just means that sysadmins' lives are that much more boring because of the cloud.
Yeah, I think
It's
it
one
does.
more thing the cloud has ruined.
But here's where I kind of expected might end up back on my soapbox. But is that really a bad thing though? If we're talking about production,
Yeah,
is
no.
that- having boring production is I really feel like that's something good. I'd rather be bored on days where I'm babysitting production because that means that the business is working, the business is operating,
Yeah.
and we kind of talked about this in the pre-show, was that when virtual machines and automation started taking the world by storm, one of the things that I heard from all of my sysadmin buddies was, "Oh my gosh, I cannot adopt Ansible. I cannot put SaltStack in this environment. You know why? Because as soon as I get it working, they're going to fire me. They're going to automate my job away, and then they're going to let me go. And then what am I going to do? Am I just going to spend the rest of my career automating everybody's crap, and then just when everything's automated, what? I end up shoveling snow, or how do I make money?" But the intention, the beauty of having this kind of boring infrastructure now is it leaves you more open, it leaves you more energized to focus on other things, whether that's spending time planning a LAN party that you don't kind of hide underneath a patching night. Um, you can spend that time going to websites like Linux Academy, if Linux Academy is still a thing. Uh, I just realized that's been a couple of years. I've been spoiled by my Red Hat Learning subscription.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but you go to websites where you can try out new skills, where you can launch podcasts, you can form communities, you can spend that time that you were spending troubleshooting things after hours, trying to get it up and running by the next morning. I don't know, sleeping. That's a good one.
What?
Enjoying time with your family. I've actually been in a position where I've slept on the couch before because my on-call rotation coincided with a family member's birthday party, and I ended up missing that birthday party because I pretty much didn't leave the car. I remember having my phone propped up on the back windshield of my car. I had my laptop out, my hotspot out,
Yep.
and I had the phone on speaker, and I had Stack Exchange or something, looking around trying to figure out, okay, I'm getting this weird error message.
Yep.
Thank God I've got remote connectivity via VPN and this hotspot, and everyone was inside singing happy birthday and eating cake. Nobody brought me cake. um, and do we really, is that really what we're looking for though? But there was such an uprising. Nowadays it'd been buzzing on it'd been trending on Twitter because I won't say that. That might start another fight, but but it would literally trend on Twitter that we can't adopt automation because I won't have a job, and that's not what cloud is for. That's not
No,
what
you're
virtual
right.
machines are for.
Yeah,
That's
and
not what Ansible is for, or
and you're
SaltStack, or any of the others.
you're right. We talked about this. I think it was before the show, or was it when we were in? I can't remember now. It's a blur. But yeah, automation. There was a point when automation was scary. I mean, there was a point when virtualization was scary. There was a point when cloud was scary, right?
Mhm.
Because all of a sudden things have to change. And the whole point of tonight's topic is that things have changed a lot in the past decade. And I don't even know if we're going to get to the point where we talk about where we think it's going, because we've gone over already. But yes, and I've been there, right? There's a part of me that almost misses the respect, maybe, that came with being the guy who pulled the all-nighter to bring the mail server back up.
Wait, you got respect for that?
Well, that's just it, right? And maybe you didn't, but you maybe thought you did, right? You felt like you had been through something, right?
Mhm.
Like I've talked lots of times. You don't know about this particular story, but I've talked lots of times on this show about this time I personally screwed up and took down our rev manager. And we had a bunch of hypervisors that were running just basically like zombies because there was no more rev manager in front of them. And I spent 2 months of overnights and whatever fixing my screw up, right? I'm kind of proud of that. Like, I didn't like doing it. It sucked. I always joke, I lost 10 pounds during those 2 months because that's how stressed out I was. I wasn't hungry. I mean, it was just like, I thought I was going to lose my job at the end of it. I didn't. I don't know if it's just because of how I handled it or whatever, but I didn't. But yeah, it's
sheer terror on the other side going, oh crap, if he wasn't here.
Yeah, right. What would have happened? Maybe it wouldn't have got deleted. I don't know. But
well, Nate's at his desk going, look, Ma, no rev manager. Wee.
Yeah, right.
So to your point though, between the three of us, we've seen sysops go to sysadmins. We've seen mainframes go to hardware, to virtual machines, to automation, to cloud, to this SRE is just, to me, like the next generation systems administrator, or whatever we're calling them now, because there's like infrastructure engineers. Don't even get me started on DevOps engineers. But whatever we're calling the next iteration of ourselves, because we can't just keep the same title, because we can't.
Right.
But it's the same job, and if you think about it, it's really just like I tell people that SRE isn't as crazy as it sounds, because if you're an SRE with an ops background, you're a sysadmin who specializes in automation programming. programming, air quotes,
Right.
because it's not programming. People ask me what programming languages I know. I go YAML.
Yeah, right. Right. Which isn't. But they don't know that. Most people don't know that.
Right. Or they'll know that I'm a sysadmin in background, and they're just like, oh,
Right.
so you don't code. I was
You
like,
don't actually code, right?
no, I'm lazy.
You format text is what you
I
do
format text.
in the right way to make it
And then I use
to make
VS
the code
Code
do the
because
thing.
I use VS Code, so it's formatted properly
There
because
you
we
go.
all know that YAML and spaces is
Oh,
a nightmare. I think I'd rather do another all-night patching night again
my
than
God.
have to deal with spacing. But
The
I
fact
look at where things are going,
the
and
the fact that going into the RHCE, I had to memorize the tab spacing command for Vim because of the YAML, all the YAML that was involved. That tells you something. Anyway, continue.
well, I was just going to say, just looking at the industry and thinking about where things are going. I mean, OpenShift, containers, Kubernetes. I mean, that's a lot of where things are going. But that's, if you think about it, everything that our part of the industry has done for the last several decades is abstracting away more of what we do, building things in a way that we don't have to manage it. We figured out how to abstract away the hardware. We figured out how to, in some ways, abstract away a lot of the networking components. Um, in fact, with the cloud, you can, if it makes sense for your organization, you can even abstract away hardware, the data center itself, by moving to the cloud. And so it's just another layer of abstraction, and it's not going to be this big mess of I want to automate my job away, or we're going to put everything in the cloud and I'm going to be unemployed. That may happen in a small percentage of environments, but that's not a healthy environment, because they're eventually going to get to the point where we're just like, we got to this no ops thing, and now we need an ops, and we just let them all go. Crap. What do we do?
Right.
But
Right.
it's just a natural
Now
progression.
who's going to
from
change the
one
filter in the air conditioner? Damn it.
right. And so it's one of those things that we can either push against it and hate every minute of it, or we can look for how do we help the business. It's not about us. It's not about the war stories. It's not about it's not about us as individuals, as systems administrators. We need to be stewards of our company's environments. We have to get to a position where we can build out servers that take us out of the equation. How can I automate this? Because then the business runs as the business should, and we get to take all the risks. We get to play with all the toys. We get to all learn all the new things in an area, in a space that's safe, that's segregated away from production, and we can collaborate. I know it's a scary thought, but we can collaborate with our developers. We can help make their yeah, I know it's crazy. We can actually talk to these guys and say, what kind of programming languages do you want available in our golden image? I mean, it's amazing that we are to a place where I think that the industry has finally accepted that we've been in the trenches long enough. So we should have these automation tools. We should have these abstraction layers. And although I like Joshua's comment in the chat about getting hired back as a consultant at 4 times the original rate.
There you go.
I mean, I know several people who work like 6 hours a week because they're the only people in the entire metro area that know how to program on some of the banking mainframes that still run.
Yep.
I mean, that's definitely an option. I'm not sure if it's the best one, but it's a thing.
It's an option.
But I've watched the industry for a long time, and I've been a podcaster. I do live streams. I talk to people. I pray one of these days that eventually we'll do in-person events again. And I've never seen the industry and the business more primed than they are right now to make those changes, to respect work-life balance, to put in the dollars to help purchase the right tools to abstract all of this away, to automate all of this away, so the business continue to run and systems administrators can have a life. Thank you for attending my TED Talk on the future of the systems administrator.
Sorry, it looks like we're having quite the fun with spammers in our YouTube chat tonight. That's not a problem we usually have. Thank you, Jason, for being so on top of that. I've been too busy managing like all the other doodads.
I am the AI ML automating this process.
Yeah, right, right. So we did have one last. I should say. I mean, I'd like to at least wrap with the one last technology that I feel like is kind of the future of
Serverless.
all the things that we've just wrapped up. Yes, so there are things like serverless. There's Lambda. There are people who think
It's just somebody else's operating system, dude.
there are people that think that that is the future and that containers are just a place to slap your legacy applications until you can get them to get them lambdified. I do
Please
not
don't
agree
lift and
with that.
shift your containers. Please don't.
Yeah, I do not.
I took my code and I pasted it in my browser and it ran and there was no server involved. Okay, so it's serverless.
Serverless, totally serverless. But containers are really the thing I wanted to close up with, right? So that is maybe not close, but that is kind of like the latest and greatest, in my opinion, in sort of the whole rabbit trail we've gone down tonight, from servers to virtual machines to cloud to now containers, right? So containerization, it's almost like everything that's old is new again, right? We keep going through these iterations, right? It's like, okay, we've got servers. Servers run processes, right? Now, what if we take the whole server and make it a process? Now we've got virtualization, right? And then, okay, now virtualization leads to all these other things and automation and whatever. And now it's like, well, what if instead of that process being an entire operating system with kernel and all that heavy stuff, it's now just like a little shard of the host's kernel running just the application, right? And now you've got, with a bunch of walling and whatever around it. Now you've got containers, right? That's a very big oversimplification, but at its core, that's really what a container is.
Right.
It's almost like power virtualization. Remember when there was power virtualization and full virtualization? Power virtualization shared the kernel with the host. That's what Zen was doing. And full virtualization was things like KVM and VMware and all that stuff. Right. So,
Well, it's the same thing with how we interact with our applications. Everything started out with dumb terminals.
yeah.
And then it went to full-fledged desktops. Then it's let's run all the applications on on the local desktop, and then it talks back to a central application. And now we're going back in a different way to kind of a dumb terminal with just an application, whether that's web-based or whether that's on my iPad Pro.
We really are.
I mean, it's funny how the industry kind of flexes both ways, and even virtual desktops now are making a resurgence. So I can be on my tablet, or I can be on my personal laptop, and I can connect into like an AWS instance that's running a virtualized desktop with a hardware GPU somewhere in the Amazon universe, and I don't manage anything here on my home network. It's all somewhere near the core of my data center. So it's just the industry keeps flexing back and forth, and so it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. Although I think that's quite a number of years out. Hopefully I'll be out of this part of the industry by then.
Well, I mean, I think that the thing is that there are visionaries that come along that have a great idea that the industry's not quite ready for yet. And that idea gets turned into something that the industry is ready for, right? And that's the new hotness, right? And then that new hotness eventually becomes status quo, right? And then the next visionary comes along and has a grand idea, right? So you keep saying it's like we're just sort of it's like we're on a wheel, right? I think it's really just technology has to catch up with the vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we'll always be. It's not where we are now and won't be tomorrow. There'll always be that guy that has that person that has the next great idea. And that great idea we're not ready for yet, right? So today it's things like virtual reality, right? And we've touched on virtual reality a number of times in this show. But the idea of walking around with a VR headset on, it's not feasible today. So we don't have the processing power. We don't have the way to make it small enough. We don't have the way to power it. We don't have a way to make it cheap enough that everybody can be in VR all the time, like some fiction has told us is the way of the future. But you remember Star Trek? Star Trek The Next Generation, probably one of my favorite TV series of all time.
It's what got me into technology.
They had these things that they carried around. Pads, remember the pads they had?
Mm-hmm.
We have them. They're here, right? They looked like complete fallacy when we saw it in Star Trek, right? Like that can never happen. Something that small that can talk to the ship way up in space, right? Well, what do you think these things do? Right? And maybe not. I guess GPS they talk about. They talk to things up in space, but everything that science fiction tells us, everything feasible anyway that science fiction tells us, eventually seems to come true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I've gone way afield at this point, but the point is, right? People have a vision. That vision becomes something that's attainable, right? And then we recycle, right? And we keep going through the same thing. But I guess in a way we have gone into what's coming next. I don't know. 5 minutes or less. Who's got a prediction about what sysadmin is going to look like in 5 or 10 years? I don't know if
I don't know. I think it's going to be more of the same. It's the same thing we do today, but perhaps at a different level.
Mm-hmm.
So, instead of herding cattle anymore, we'll be, seeding universes.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure what the next thing is going to be, because I don't think the current vision has been fully realized and commoditized.
Yeah.
Just look at the Kubernetes space, and there's like 1,000 different open source projects to do one thing, and it's there's not the predetermined. This is how you set up a Kubernetes cluster. OpenShift tries. OpenShift is one route. I think what is it, Rancher, that just came out with Rancher, now part of anyway. It's getting close to bedtime, I think, but so I mean, OpenShift tries to have an opinionated install, but it's not the only way. And then other companies are coming out with their own idea of this is what Kubernetes should look like in certain use cases, but we haven't quite figured out what the current thing is. We're moving back into an operator mainframe type of a setup. I mean, you don't talk to hypervisor 3 now with Kubernetes. You talk to the controller in front of the Kubernetes cluster, and you deploy your pods, and it kind of goes off into this thing, and it runs, and you don't know if it's done until you get the output from your job. And so we've kind of swung back to this mainframe, but it hasn't quite been fully realized yet. And there's a lot of work on edge, which I'm not talking the marketing edge. I'm talking about like the network edge, where instead of having your application in 5 or 6 data centers across the country or the globe, instead what the real technology edge is. Instead, you have a bunch of little, even 1U servers or virtual servers scattered across every single metro area inside of your market, and you're deploying your application there. So, think about things like sporting events. My Kansas City Chiefs doing great, but if I could go and put on my VR glasses and watch the team play, and I can focus in on a player and I can look at his number,
Yep.
and all of a sudden his stats come up on my glasses. That you can't do that if the data is going to intermix with 50,000 fans and go all the way out to the nearest Amazon data center and then come all the way back. Instead, you have these edge servers that kind of extend the presence and shorten that latency, so that you're looking, instead of waiting on something to go to a data center and back. Instead, it could be even a data center underneath the stadium.
It's going to the rack that's behind the concession stand. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Quite literally.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you what the next big thing is, because we're kind of coming up the hill, kind of on that roller coaster. We're coming up the hill on the current vision. So it's way too soon to tell.
I used to think, and this is no joke, right? This is the short vision that I had when I was first getting into IT, late 90s, early 2000s, right? I used to think that I missed it, that I missed all of the revolution that was the computer revolution, right?
Right.
All of the craziness that happened in the 60s and 70s, and with all the, people cloning hardware and all the weird inventions and all the stuff that led up to what I thought was just like the pinnacle of computing. Mm-hmm. Late 90s, early 2000s, right? Obviously, I was wrong. Things have changed so much since then. But that's what I thought then, right? So I've never been a big visionary, right? I just kind of do what's in front of me. I do think we're on the cusp of a number of things right now. One of which is like the VR space and metaverses and stuff like that. And you kind of touched on it there with your sporting event analogy. I'm not a sport ball guy, but I get the concept. But augmented reality, that's a perfect, example of what could happen in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Maybe, right?
Yep.
We've seen AR things tipping their toes into AR with games on your phone, Pokemon Go, right? That's AR. The game we used to play, Jason, Ingress, right?
Ingress. Trying to remember the name of it too.
Yeah, that predated Pokemon Go, right? And there's lots of things that are happening like that, right?
I think there's a Harry Potter one too, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I forget what it's called now, but yeah, same deal. Except instead of
installed
hunting,
it, played it for a few days, just for nostalgia purposes, both for Harry Potter and for my days of playing Pokemon Go. Although after about like 4 days, I think I just uninstalled that and reinstalled Pokemon Go.
yeah, right. It's like you want to relive the past, and then you're like, why don't I just go play the game I loved instead of playing this weird facsimile? All right. So anyway, this has been quite the rabbit trail. We're half an hour over.
So to conclude,
Good idea.
so to kind of wrap this up, so you've got AR may be the next big thing. I think we kind of all more or less agreed on that. But then if you look in the other corner of that same office, you've got the guy who still insists on running an IRC client in the command line.
What are you talking about? I don't know. I don't have like a dozen coworkers that do just exactly that.
Right. Well, yeah, you work for Red Hat, so yeah, there's still.
Yeah, right.
What communication tool do you use? All of them, I think.
Yeah, pretty much everything that's available to mankind right now. That's what we use. I have an entire monitor devoted to my chat clients.
I have a workspace right here for exactly the same thing. So if someone pings me, I have to go swipe over and.
Hold on.
Right, hold on.
This one. Here we go.
Remember back in the day when you had like even before Pigeon, when you had applications that you just put in all 5 or 10 of your different accounts.
Yeah.
And just aggregate everything for you.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore.
Pigeon was the epitome of communications, in my opinion.
Yes.
It was, right? You could put everything in there. Your
Pigeon was
XMPP
literally
and your ICQ and your AIM and your whatever else. Yeah, right. You don't have that anymore.
Pigeon was actually the first open source project I had encountered. I didn't know it until years later when I got into Linux and was like, oh wait, Pigeon, that's still around?
Wow, it's amazing.
Of course it is. Open source software never dies.
Yeah, right.
Right.
No, it just got one guy like, I will not let it die. I don't care if we have 3 users. It's mine.
I think that's a XKCD.
It's my baby.
Comic as well.
Yeah, right.
Oh goodness! Thank you guys so much for inviting me on. This was a blast.
Yeah, this has been fun. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, Eric, you want to tell them how, if anything in this entire show has struck a chord and they want to reach out and tell you how, I don't know, whatever they're passionate about.
So I am very, very easy to find online. If you go to Twitter or YouTube well, not YouTube, I don't have enough followers yet. But if you go to Twitter or Mastodon or Matrix or Telegram or my website, it's all IT Guy Eric, ITGUYERIC.
I'll have to find you on
IT Guy
Matrix.
Eric. Yes, I am on Matrix. I love Matrix. I talk to anyone and everyone about Matrix. I preach the good word. I'm hoping to get ordained into the Church of Element at some point, but
It's funny how there's such great products out there like Matrix, right? I tried to move the Iron Sysadmin community to it. Yeah, right. It's gonna be a whole other thing. I tried to move the Iron Sysadmin community to Matrix, and we just didn't get the buy-in. I don't know why. We went to Discord, and everyone's like, "Yay, Discord!" I thought Matrix would be perfect for our viewers.
What you do is you set up a Matrix room, and then you set up a bridge to Discord, and then no one will know.
I didn't want to have to manage so many things, so really, it's my own fault.
Automation.
Automation.
To Joshua's point, that is the one place I'm not, is the metaverse. I am not on the metaverse.
Well, it's such a hard thing to be on at the moment because it's not really
unless
formed.
I'm plugged into the Matrix.
Yeah, right. We don't know. I don't feel a thing. All right. So anyway, this has been great. Folks, we're going to go to a break. If you're listening to the audio show, as usual, we're going to split this up into 2 shows. So you're going to want to look for the B section of the show if you want to find out what's going on in Jason and I's life. I don't know if Eric's probably done. He doesn't want to hang out for the second half of the show.
You're going to guilt me like that. I see how it is.
I don't blame you, man. It's been an hour and a half. I told you an hour.
Dude, I've done 40 episodes of a podcast, and I won't self promote, but
You can
it's
self-promote if
easy
you
enough
want
to
to.
find.
Feel free, man. You got a podcast. Go ahead, talk about it.
So I helped co-found the Pseudo Show podcast. So if you know the Destination Linux Network, I helped launch the Pseudo Show. I'm taking a bit of a step back to do more community-driven stuff, to not sit in the hot seat. So basically, to not do what Nate's doing right now. So I'm taking a bit of a break to go and talk to other people and that kind of thing. But yeah, our standard interview time was it's like a 40-minute show. So we probably should do hour, but then it's the internet, so let's do 90 minutes. And we'll try and give you some of your life back. But 90 minutes, figure pre-show, post-show, troubleshooting, where's my mute button, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah.
And then everything else. So, all that to get like a 25-minute interview, which we started out saying that, hey, we're going to be a 30-minute show. And then like 4 50-minute shows later, we're like, it's going to be however long it's going to be.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
That's it.
When we started Iron Sysadmin, and Jason remembers these conversations, we're like, let's make it an hour. An hour sounds like a good number. I don't even know if we're going to have enough content for an hour. I don't think we've had a single show under an hour. All right. So anyway, we're going to go to the break. Anybody who wants to tune in for the second half, we'll be back in 5, 15, 27 minutes. I don't know. Hopefully it'll be short. And yeah, we'll see you after the break. Let me find my OBS window here.
Push the button, Nate.
I'm gonna push the button. Push the button.
Push the button, Frank.
Oh, you didn't mean that button. You meant this button. All right, we'll be back, folks. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin.
Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/Iron Sysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you.
Welcome back. That was fun.
It was.
That was a good conversation. This is where I realized that I didn't open up the news articles. So, yeah, we're gonna pretend that didn't happen. All right, so this is the part of the show where we give you our Patreon update, and we thank all you awesome folks who give us your hard-earned money to help us run this show. And that list this week includes Zed Thor. I'm going to make sure to pronounce that right every time because he reached out to me to say that it's Zed and not Z. So Zed Thor, name pending 197, Jeremiah, Aranami, Andrew, Tetro, Bruce, Robert, Matt, David, Solemn, Trooper-ish, Linux Sys 666, Gimpy B, Mark with a K, The Mentor, John the Nice Guy, Mark with a C, Julius, Andy J, Charles, and 22532. So thank you to all of our patrons. Some of you should, at this point, be receiving Fulfilled by Patreon merch for being patrons. So I'm going to probably reach out to those of you that I think should have received it. Make sure that you did, because this is the first time we're doing this whole Fulfilled by Patreon thing. Yeah. Check your Patreon inboxes.
Does this mean I'm getting merch?
I don't know if you're in the right tier, man. I know Mark thought he was getting merch, but he's in the wrong.
Way to gatekeep.
Yeah, right. So it's funny, right? So Patreon, even if you're giving enough money, it doesn't automatically put you in the tier that matches the amount of money. You have to actually pick the tier. And Mark is giving
Yeah,
enough
that's
money,
by
but he didn't
design.
pick the tier, right? So
Yep.
so yeah, I'm probably just gonna send Mark a shirt because he's co-hosted long enough, and he's given me money to run the show. So like that's cool. You've already got a shirt, so heck with you.
Yeah, I bought my own a long time ago.
You did right around the time that I released the shirts. They're like limited edition, man. There's not that many out there. Hint, hint, folks. You can go buy a shirt
You
at
know,
Teespring.
at the time, when I got them, I got one for you, didn't I? I know I got two of them.
You got one for
And
Dustin. Remember
that
Dustin?
was Dustin. The prints were different. Like it was the same image, but the print, like clearly they were two different shirts. So
Yeah, I've heard. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it after I said you can go buy a shirt, but I've heard people report some not so great quality out of Teespring. I keep meaning to switch to a different printer and just haven't yet. So maybe you shouldn't buy a shirt yet.
No, the quality was fine. Like the quality was great on both of them. It was just when you put them side by side, it was like
They were slightly different.
This is the colors were slightly different. So it was like,
Oh, okay. I mean, direct to garment printing is, whatever. And at the time, the whole concept was relatively new, right? I still have the first ever Iron Sysadmin T-shirt, and I still wear it, and it's still in good shape. So I mean, they're definitely quality.
if you open up a Redbubble shop, you could have Iron Sysadmin T-shirts, Iron Sysadmin panhandles, Iron Sysadmin thongs. I mean,
What the hell is a
the heights are limited.
What's a panhandle?
The hot pad things.
Oh, you mean
stuff
like
out of the
okay,
oven.
okay. I guess that makes sense. I always thought a panhandle was either Florida or, the handle of a pan. But I see what you mean. It's more like handling, like a panhandler.
That's what I said. Handler.
Yeah, okay.
If only there was a recording to
If
go back.
only there was a recording to go back and check.
Too late now.
All right. So, yes, thank you to all of you patrons. If you would like to buy merch, I mean, I keep saying, right? So, for my Jeep stuff, I use a company called Printful, which then integrates with WordPress's shop WooCommerce, right? And I could literally sell stuff right on my website. Nobody buys it, but I could. So maybe I'll do that someday. Set that up with IronSysAdmin.com so people can buy it direct from there.
You keep that plugin up to date, right?
Of course I do.
Okay.
My
Just
God,
checking, 'cause-
do you think I would run a WordPress anything that I didn't check at least weekly for updates?
Weekly.
Yeah, right. Nightly.
I get alerts. So I run something called WordFence, which is no, they call it a WAF for WordPress, but yeah, I mean it's very application specific.
Yeah.
But their security team is really good, and I get alerts and updates constantly, and the number I'm glad I don't run a lot of plugins because some of this stuff is just, oh my God, so bad.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I don't run it more than I do. I run it for that site because I needed a way to run a store, and it was already a WordPress site. And that site probably has the most plugins installed. Most of them are like one or two plugins, and that's it.
Yeah, get you some WordFence.
WordFence.
There's a free version too.
All right, I'll have to look for a WordFence. All right, anyway. So there's your WordPress minute with Jason.
The guy who hated WordFest for years and years and still not super thrilled with it, but
you know what? Honestly, I would run Drupal, but WordPress is just better from a like site administration standpoint. Is Drupal even around anymore? I assume it is.
Yeah, Drupal's still around, and I was reading this recently because I had to get back into some Drupal stuff for something else. So Drupal has always been migrating from one version of Drupal to another has always been a project, a big project.
Yep.
Whereas migrating from one version of WordPress to another has been like, yeah, okay, and what's the next thing to do?
Click.
Like, who cares?
Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So apparently in Drupal 9. I guess the way that I was reading it, upgrading from Drupal 8 to 9 is going to be a button click.
Like
And it
it,
shouldn't
like it,
be as big a deal.
like it has been on WordPress for the past like ever.
Yeah, maybe after eight major versions of Drupal, they finally like came up with an API that's stable.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I mean, I always liked Drupal as a platform better. Maybe it's just because I generally root for the little guy, and Drupal I was seeing as the little guy.
Yeah. I think it can be more powerful, but you have to know what you're doing. I mean, most of what you need to do in Drupal is like you're building.
Yeah,
You're building everything from scratch.
yeah, yeah, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I liked it better because it was more like a framework that didn't make many assumptions about what you were hosting, where WordPress is very much more on Rails. And I don't mean like Ruby.
Yep. Oh, thankfully.
All right. So anyway, I don't know if I had much else in the way of announcements. Did you have any announcements? When's the next? B-sides, it's
November.
ideal.
Next B-sides will be in November.
November.
Hopefully it will be in person.
Yeah.
Dear God, please let it be in person.
I hope so. I want to get us back to in-person anything.
If it's
I
not
just-
in person, then I hope we've been hit by an asteroid.
I heard they were all gung-ho. Summit was going to be in person this year, and I this isn't written in stone. I heard it secondhand. I heard that it's not going to be in person now. It's going to be
When is it
virtual
supposed to be?
again. April? April.
Yeah, it's probably not going to be. It'll probably be virtual.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everything was kind of going okay, and you know, Delta was bad, but
Yeah.
it wasn't. You know, the infections were going down and things were sort of petering out, and then Omicron came out and went hello. And the last statistic I saw said that 99% of infections in the U.S. of COVID now are Omicron, and we have some of the highest infection rates we've ever had of COVID. So, like,
You know,
okay,
it's like I don't want to go down the COVID rabbit hole like we do so many times, but I know you're a little more plugged into it because of that podcast you listen to. I'm having trouble worrying as much about Omicron. There's a lot of infections, but the death rate's not there.
right.
Like with the
You're
with
right.
the first round of COVID, it was like, yes, it's very transmissible. It's also very deadly, and that's the thing that
Yes.
worried me. People die. That's a bad thing. That's a very bad thing. People getting sick that don't die is inconvenient, but it's not as bad of a thing. Like, why is it still such a big deal if people aren't dying from it like they were?
It's because it's spreading so fast and to everybody. So
Yeah.
you and I are probably, you know, like if I got COVID tomorrow, I'm sure I'd be fine.
Yeah, like I'm
healthy. I don't have any major problems. Whatever.
not
But
I'm not trying to
I
tell
have-
people that, you know,
Yeah.
like that they shouldn't worry about Omicron. I'm just saying that personally, I'm having trouble getting
Right.
as worried about it as I have been for Delta and for, I guess, Alpha was that the first strain?
Yes, because they went by the Greek alphabet. So
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not concerned about Omicron. I don't want it.
Well, yeah, me too. I
have
don't
no
want to
interest
get it
in
either.
getting it. I'm actually more concerned with what long COVID could look like and could be than anything else about getting it for myself. But my concern isn't necessarily about me overall. I'm concerned with passing it on to somebody else. Like I have family members
Yes.
who are compromised, and
Yeah,
you know
that's
that
still my
would be
concern.
could
right?
potentially be deadly.
You know, we're still living with my mother-in-law who's fighting cancer. She's on chemo, as many people know that have ever had to deal with cancer, which is probably like everybody in the friggin' world at this point knows someone that has probably had to deal with cancer. Her immune system is down, so we do worry about that. That's really my biggest concern with Omicron. And she's also still unvaccinated, which frustrates me, but it is what it is. But anyway, that's really our biggest fear, right? Like, I'm not even worried about the kids getting it at this point, except for transmitting it to her, right? So, I don't know. This has been your COVID 5 minutes with Nate.
Yeah, you identify what your acceptable risk is and make an appropriate decision.
Right. Yeah, I don't want Iron Sysadmin to make you guys think you should or should not worry about Omicron. I'm just more or less like,
Right. But
Personally,
and
this is how I've been feeling lately.
what I think is absolutely key to this whole thing is make your risk analysis and make a decision based on that, but
Right.
respect and honor the decisions that other people have made. If they
Yes.
don't want you around
That's a
because
big
you
deal.
know, whatever, stay the hell away. Like,
That's been a problem this whole freaking pandemic, almost since day one. That it's this is my choice. My choice is that I don't know, pick a thing. You know what I'm talking about. But the people that are, I think it's stupid, therefore you should think it's stupid. And because I think it's stupid, I'm going to put you at risk. And that is so freaking frustrating.
yep,
Frustrating.
exactly.
I don't want to get angry.
So-
All right, so we're going to move on. You got anything fun going on in your life, Jason? Any cool conferences you're going to? Any awesome places you're going? No, we're not,
I'm
because
still
we're all
locked
trapped
down,
at
so-
home.
What have I done lately? We had a water event.
A water event?
A water event.
Does that mean you flooded your basement?
No. We my wife discovered, I don't even remember how. She went under the sink to grab something and was like, "Why is everything wet?"
Oh no.
And I was like, okay. So I came over and looked. And I'm in there and I'm like, where the hell is the water coming from? Because everything looked fine. I didn't see leaks coming from anywhere. And I start reaching around and I grab the trap on the sink and crush it. Just lightly grab the
That'll-
trap and
yeah,
my
that'll make
hand went
things
right
wet.
through it and
Yeah.
I went, and then of course water starts shooting out everywhere. And I'm like, I found the problem. So the water here is very acidic.
Yeah.
And of
yeah.
course, the house that I moved into was owned by a plumber. So,
So nothing's done
the-
right.
correct. Yeah.
It was done with
I don't
spare
understand.
parts he had in the back of his truck.
I have never seen water rot through pipe
Yeah.
so fast ever. Like through copper too. Like I've never seen
Yeah.
water rot through it like that. I swear he used the thinnest stuff he could possibly find. So I had to get a new trap.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right. So I went and got the parts, and we had a previous water event when we first moved in. So the shelf or the bottom of the cabinet had been missing.
Mhm.
So I was out getting the other parts. I'm like, well, I'll rebuild the cabinet, and I got the parts for that. And then while I was rebuilding that, I'm trying to hook everything up and get the water hooked up and everything else. And I noticed that there's a very small leak in the feed pipes going up to the faucet. I'm like, oh, okay, like that's not a big deal. I'll just tighten it back down, and I will go to tighten it, and like I can see that it's starting to like twist the wrong
Uh-huh.
way, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
time to replace the faucet. So now the faucet's been replaced.
Yeah.
So we've got a new faucet,
Yeah.
a new drainage system, and a whole new shelf.
Yeah.
But it's all done now. So that was my fun.
Yeah, there's a joke amongst car people that you don't buy cars from car people, especially mechanics, because mechanics will like their car will run. It might look and sound great, but all the like they know what they can get away with and still be safe. Or
Oh, yeah.
they're willing to take their life in their hands, right? Because they're a mechanic and they quote unquote know what they can handle, right? I guess the same goes for houses owned by plumbers.
Yeah, I've heard this about different folks. Like they say don't buy a house owned by an electrician because you're just gonna have problems with the electric.
Yeah.
But like it's the cobbler's kids thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, right. I mean, there was certainly a point where my home IT infrastructure was suffering because of my IT day job. I just didn't want to deal with it when
Oh,
I
yeah.
came home. And I could imagine being a plumber or being a mechanic or being a contractor or an electrician. Like, that's the same deal, right? You're going to come home from work and you can be like, I do not want to look at a wire nut. I don't want
Yep.
to look at a fuse box or a
Hey,
breaker box,
this
right?
the
Yeah.
guy built the house. He built this house.
Yeah.
And the plumbing, honestly, I have to say the plumbing is the only thing that I really have a problem with.
Yeah.
We've replaced a lot of the plumbing, which is not fun in a house that,
I mean,
like
It could also be that it was just time, you know, and maybe that's why he got out of it. I don't know what the story was with the previous owner, but
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's
maybe
kind of
he
a sad
knew.
story.
Maybe
But
he knew what was coming and decided to get out. I don't know.
so that's been that. Other than that, playing on and off with the 3D printer and kind of just heads down working at the day job stuff.
Yeah,
Day job, side job.
conference, podcast.
Conference has been quiet for 2 months because we needed a break.
Yeah, right. Because the conference is over, and you have at least a
Yeah,
little breathing
yeah,
space after the conference is
yeah,
over, right?
yeah. Next month we're gonna start that back up again.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. My dad and my sister organize a foot race every year, and my dad's like, I get a week off, and I got to start planning for the next year, because the part of the race is on state-owned roads, which means he needs to get permits, he needs to get permissions, he needs to get organization from the cops, he needs to get signage, like all that stuff. And government never moves fast, and part of that is government, right? So, yeah, he's basically like getting stuff lined up for that 11 months in advance. So I'd imagine you don't have quite that much to deal with, but yeah, it's got to be frustrating. So from my front, I've been tinkering, and you might be interested in this because I know you were talking about No Man's Sky in our chat earlier today in the Discord community. But so Mark and I have been playing a lot of No Man's Sky. He got me into No Man's Sky. I got another friend that I've known since high school into No Man's Sky. So that sort of rejuvenated both Mark and I into No Man's Sky. And No Man's Sky is one of these games where, yes, there's like a very loose initial plot line, which is basically like getting you up to speed. And then after that, it's just this open world. And I shouldn't say world, it's an open galaxy, like several galaxies. There's literally, you can travel from solar system to solar system, and there's planets in every solar system, and you can do things on all those different planets, and there's space stations there, there's missions everywhere, and it's just a really open game. You can play it however you want. And the thing I've been tinkering with is obviously there's money in the game, right? There's several different types of money. One of which is units, which is like the basic like dollars type money, right? And you can do things to make said money, right? And one of those things is you can make like essentially like a farm, right? And I've been playing around with making an activated indium harvesting farm, and it's basically around elements and whatever in the game, right? So I now have an indium farm. It was fun, right, to build this thing and to figure out how to do all this stuff. And it's more than just like farming. In most games is usually very grind related. Like you go to a dungeon and you kill the same things over and over and over again, and you end up finding all the things that you were there to get, and then you can sell them or whatever. And then you go back and do the same thing again. Well, farming in No Man's Sky is more like you build a farm, like a traditional farm, where you do a thing and that thing gives you crop. In this case, it's mining activated indium for me. And it's just like this crazy concept in a game, I think, where I just check in on this thing once a day. I collect my activated indium. I go sell it. I make a couple million units. And then I don't even have to play the game the rest of the day if I don't want to. It just makes me money. It's crazy. I think it's an interesting concept in a game. Like, I've never had a game that I really played much that had a mechanic like that, where it was literally just like, I'm making money from harvesting crops. And I guess it just, I don't know.
I've played a number of hours of No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
I mean, I never got to the point where I was like harvesting crops. And to each their own. That doesn't sound super exciting to me. Most of my experience in No Man's Sky for the first couple of hours was, oh shit, I died. Wait, where the hell's the planet I was on? Okay, I'll start over.
Yeah, so it's not exciting or fun in that I can go mine activated indium, because that's not exciting or fun. It's the planning that went into doing it that was fun, right? And I put, an hour or two into finding a site and building the farm and getting power to the farm getting enough storage built on the farm to put all of the activated indium into, building a little base that I can go and like so I can get to the farm quickly and easily, building a landing pad so that I can then put my stuff into my ship at the like there was a bunch of planning that went into it, and then building it. A couple hours of work like that, and now all I do is visit the thing once or twice a day, collect my stuff, and I can go make money on it. I think it's it's a neat concept. I guess it sounds kind of like work, right? But like in all,
Yeah,
I
well, but
just think it's neat.
you have all those different areas to explore while that stuff is running.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. So now what I can do is I can make money off of this and go do other things that are fun, right? And then just go back and collect my money every so often. It's kind of cool. I don't know.
yeah, I know there's a story. I think there's a story in there somewhere, like in the game itself. There's
Kinda.
there's all sorts of hints and everything else that are going on. So I haven't gotten far enough to figure out if like what all that is about.
Yeah.
So I've just kind of been poking around, but I know other people like Jason Street is talking about playing this all the time. Like he plays it in VR, and he's always going on about the hours and hours that he plays in this game.
Oh, it's a crazy experience in VR.
So I hear.
It is well, I mean, it's I don't want to go too deep into like a story to talk about this, but basically there was a thing I was trying to do in No Man's Sky. There was a planet that was acting differently for me than it was for Mark and my friend, right? And I was trying to figure out why that was. And by differently, I mean like the planet was the same for all of us, but like the weather on the planet was different. And by weather, I mean they had like these harsh storms so that when they came to play with me where my base was, I saw this very nice planet and they saw like these terrible storms, right? So I went through this whole long procedure to take. I basically had a second character, and I needed to get that character to the planet so that I could see if that also happened for him, right? And I took a whole Saturday to get this done because it's not easy to just like pinpoint a planet in the universe, except with this system that they call it. It's a portal system. It's literally identical to Stargate, where you have an address, you put in the address of these glyphs, and then you can go through a portal and get to the planet, right? The problem was I had to get my character to the point where he knew all the glyphs, and then found a portal, right? And this took me a whole day Saturday, right? Because the character just wasn't ready for that. But I did part of it in what people who use VR frequently refer to as flat mode, which is like the standard way to play a game, keyboard, mouse, right? And then I did the second half of it in VR, and just because I felt like it. And by the end of it, I felt like invested in this whole thing, right? And doing it in VR made me feel like I was accomplishing a thing, right? Because I spent my whole Saturday doing this. But that's how good VR is in No Man's Sky. You can really suspend your disbelief enough to feel like you are in space doing things as your character. Like, that's how good it is. If you don't have VR yet, you need to get it.
There are several VR headsets in the house, none of which are mine.
Yeah.
Are
they all Oculus?
the Oculus ones I won't touch.
I wouldn't blame you.
I have to have a Facebook account to use them, so you know, F that. Corbin has a HTC Vive headset that he's had for a couple years now, and I've used that once or twice, like briefly.
The Vive is
really nice.
That's what I've got too.
Yeah, and I think the two of us are interested in the Valve Index. So once I hit the lottery, I can get one of those.
So the nice thing about having set myself up for the Vive is that if I wanted to, I could literally just swap into the headset, which is only a couple $100 instead of $1,500 to buy the whole kit, right? Because I've already got the trackers, I've got controllers already. In fact, I even have Valve Index controllers because I just like them better. But yeah, I was considering the same thing. I want to upgrade to the Index.
My holdup with the Index, honestly, is that it requires a PC.
You can't use it on your Mac? Is that what you're saying?
Not as far as I know.
Okay. I've never really looked into that.
I haven't dug into it super deep, but my understanding is that it's built for PC. And that's fine. Like, so be it. You know,
Well,
I would prefer something that's not tethered anyway. But the
I
only
would
thing that I know of really that's not tethered that's supposed to be decent at all is the Oculus, and I won't touch it.
I would think that the Vive is the same way. Does the Vive work on Mac?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I thought you were implying that it did.
No, apparently HTC Vive does support macOS.
Okay. Because the thing that makes the VR work is Steam VR.
Right.
So if Steam VR works on Mac, I guess unless there aren't like drivers for the Valve Index for Mac, which
There's
is
not.
like the same old problem. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
there's
it.
not.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, apparently the HTC Vive is the only VR headset that supports Mac.
huh.
And look,
Interesting.
this is obviously my own choice, but I would prefer to have something that's not tethered anyway.
No,
and
I
maybe
agree
we'll
with
get
you,
there.
right? Having the cable isn't as big of a problem as you think it is, but it is annoying, right? Especially for anything that's standing VR, right? So there's several ways to play VR. There's like seated VR and there's standing like room VR.
Right.
Room VR is where you may actually move around the room, and in that case, having the tether on the back of your head is kind of a pain in the ass. There are ways around it though. There's a VR channel that I watch. What he does is he takes carabiners and those little retractable cables, or even I guess you could use bungee cords, and he strings them across his ceiling, and
Yeah.
then to the back of the headset, so that now that
Yep.
wire's not really in the way, and as you walk around, it moves with you, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's a way to deal with that. But you're right. I would rather a self-contained unit like the
Yeah, and-
Oculus, but I don't want the Oculus.
I don't. You know, I mean, at this point, I don't think I'd spend as much time in it as I would like anyway. You know, for as much as I like VR stuff, I would also like to be able to use the headset for like, and I've heard this is that VR in general is horrible for this, but I'd love to be able to, you know, have instead of having a monitor sitting on my desk, I'd love to just have it up in space in VR. But
You can do that.
Yeah.
The key to do that is you need a VR headset with a high enough resolution.
Right.
And the VR space is getting there, but it's not quite there. Like
Right.
I have a coworker, not someone I know personally, but someone I have talked to through a thread I started about metaverse stuff. She does this. She works in VR. I think she actually has the Valve Index, but she has. I forget the name of there's an application that is specifically designed to let you do this, and she has Linux terminals up, and she has Windows up, and she has
Right.
like, you know, whatever up in her VR view, and it's just like you're picturing, right? It's like, oh, here's the terminal I need, grab it, pull it up, do your thing. I don't know if she uses a physical keyboard. I'd imagine that a virtual keyboard would really suck for this. But I guess if you can type without being able to see, like most of us can, you could just use a physical keyboard. But yeah, she works that way. I don't know if she does it every day or not, but she showed screenshots and videos of her doing this.
Yeah, I've seen it, but the resolution is never
That's the key.
that great.
Yeah, that's the key. You need high resolution.
Yeah, and buying a headset just for that doesn't, you know, but given
Yeah.
prices right now, it's just
It's
not a priority for me. So I just haven't done it.
I don't blame you. And I've mentioned this before. The reason I have the headset I have is because Mark gave me his when he upgraded. Right. So
Right.
the Valve or the HTC that I have was Mark's. He upgraded to the Valve Index, and being that he didn't like need to recoup the money, he gave it to me, and I bought the stuff to go with it. Right. But that's like a gateway drug, right? So I have it. It's good enough that I don't feel like I need to go buy a better headset, but I'd really like one. You know how that goes.
Yeah, and the headsets that we have in the house are, you know, they're the kids, you know.
Yeah.
Corbin has his Vive, and my other son has we got him the Quest 2.
Mm-hmm.
You know, mostly so that he can play like Fallout and some graffiti game where he can spray graffiti all over the place.
Ooh, that
'cause
sounds like
he's
fun.
an artist.
Oh, I guess if you're an
He
artist,
loves
that makes
it.
sense.
Like it's really cool. I was in there, I messed around with it too. Like it's really really neat. And he likes it because it just feels, you know, it's not obviously going to feel as real as being out there and graffitiing in the real world, but he's like the way that the spray handles and the way that the different nozzles work and everything. He's like, it's really accurate.
Some of it's close enough. I haven't played that game specifically, but I've been playing Half-Life Alyx. When I got the new computer, I was able to have a machine beefy enough to run Half-Life Alyx. And Half-Life Alyx is basically a Valve Half-Life game that was designed for VR. It's not like they ported it to VR. It was designed for VR. So the UI, the way that you store items, the way that you control your weapons, whatever, was all designed with VR in mind. And it is crazy immersive to the point where I was playing it one night and I'm like paranoid, looking over my shoulder because like things are creeping up on me. It's a really good game.
Yeah, I heard it's amazing.
It's really easy to be like, oh crap, I'm going to be killed by zombies in a second or whatever, mutants, I guess. But yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, all of the kids have come out of VR. Just some of the games they play, they come out shaking. They're like, oh, like I need a minute,
dude. I mean, if it's to the point where I was playing No Man's Sky in the evenings, like after work, after dinner, I'd play some No Man's Sky. I'd be up till 11:30, right, and then I have to force myself to get out of VR and go to bed, and then I wouldn't be able to sleep because your brain is just like activated. You know what I mean? And it's not just, how screens sort of activate your brain. They say that screen time at bedtime is bad for sleep. It's that combined with like your brain is in this other headspace where you're not you're a spaceman out in the universe, flying your spaceship and taking down space pirates, right?
Some of it can be incredibly real. I mean, I've watched, Corbin's brought friends over, and some of the ones that are in that for the first time, he's like, be really careful because when you step off of something in VR, you're gonna feel like you've stepped off on it in the real world, and you're gonna fall. And they're like, oh no, it's VR, and then boom, they're on the ground.
It's no joke. I've bumped into walls. My office isn't that big, right? And it's even got. There's like safety grids that come up if you get too close to the wall. It's really easy to miss that. I forget if you were on the show when I talked about it, but I lost a monitor because my daughter got too close to the desk and slammed it right on top of the monitor.
Yeah. No, I'm talking, it's not even the safety grid stuff. I'm talking like completely open space. You're not near anything.
Yeah.
But in whatever game you're playing, you step off of a building and you start falling. And your character's falling out of the sky.
Your brain is like,
and your brain goes, oh crap, and you just crumple, and then poof, people are laying on the floor, and they're like, wait, why am I on the floor?
Yep. But yeah, VR, it seems like every show we end up talking about VR, even when Mark's not here. But it is great. It's a hell of an experience. If you want to hear some of our opinions on the metaverse stuff, we did a show on it, I think 2 episodes ago. Jason, I don't think you were here for that, but if anybody that is listening to this wants to hear Mark and I go on about VR and the metaverse, go check out that show. I think it was episode 113. It was good stuff. Anyway, we were chatting about stuff going on in my life. Let's see, 3D printing. I'm tinkering with 3D printing costume armor.
Cosplay.
Yeah, well, kind of. It's a Halloween costume, which is kind of the same thing, right? But I'm trying to get started early, right? So, do you know that there is a Voltron remake on Netflix?
Yes.
Okay. So the armor that they wear, the paladins wear, the pilots of the Lions wear. I had this idea a couple years ago because my kids were really into that show, and I watched Voltron growing up. I'm not ashamed to say it. This is a really good show, right? We were going to, as a family, go as the Voltron Paladins, and I just didn't know how to make the armor. Well, I found a company that sells basically the 3D prints. You have the plastic Voltron. I had the metal one, man. I wish I still had it.
Okay, Mr. Moneybags, okay? With your metal Voltron.
Dude, I was like 6 when I had it, all right? I don't even know where it came from. I got it for Christmas or something. I had the metal Voltron. I so wish I still had it. It was awesome.
This was my original Voltron that I had when I was, I don't know
I
how old I was when Voltron came out, and
Dude,
I wanted the metal one so bad.
I so wish I had saved it. I so wish I had saved it because it was awesome.
I can't believe this thing. I can't believe it. I found this in some old stuff of mine a couple years ago, and I was like completely taken aback that the thing still existed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had the metal ones. I don't even. My mom probably threw them away because I broke them all. Anyway, I'm trying to print a helmet on the 3D printer that you and I both have, the Ender 5. The print area is not quite big enough to print a helmet for an adult, maybe for a kid. And this is all to prepare for, can I actually realistically print this armor? Because like I said, or as I was saying when you distracted me with your Voltron, I found a company that makes the STL files, and it's not that much money. It's like $60 or something for the files to print out armor for these paladins, right? And I really want to do it, but the printer's not quite big enough. So I'm trying to figure out, like, can I cut up this helmet? Here, I found a free one online. This isn't from that. This is actually Snake Eyes from the new G.I. Joe movies. So I have it like cut into pieces here, if you can see. Yeah. And the idea is, can I put this back together now that it's printed good enough that it is, one, solid enough to wear, and that it is two, like you don't see a crazy seam in it, right? And and if I can do that, was it little enough work that I don't drive myself crazy doing it, right?
I think there are applications. I don't know which ones do it, but I think there are applications that you can identify how large of a build plate you have.
Yeah.
Like, you know, what volume you have to work with, that can split it up for you, and then it's just up to you to sort of glue the pieces together.
Yeah. So the slicer I use, which is Prusa Slicer, which if you have a Prusa printer, right, it just has a cut feature in it, where you can just say, like, I want it to cut right here. It's really simple. It just makes a plane and says, cut it on this plane. But it makes a flat, straight cut, which is then hard to line back up again later. So I was looking into Fusion 360, which is like a whole rabbit hole, right?
Yep.
With Fusion 360, if you can figure out how to do it, you can make it so that it's like tabbed.
Yeah.
Right, so that it fits together as tabs, right? And then you can glue it back together that way, and then you get a much better product that way. But, man, I spent probably half a day trying to learn Fusion 360 well enough to do it, and I couldn't. I can't.
YouTube
I'm watching YouTube videos. It's not working the same way because Fusion 360 is a very deep tool. You can use it for so many things. There's so many different ways to use it. There's so many different ways you can output the stuff. There's so many different modes you can edit in. I must have been in the wrong mode or God knows what. And the video I'm watching is the UI doesn't quite line up with what I've got because mine's slightly newer and the UI changed. And I gave up. And I'm like, all right, does Prusa Slicer do it? It does. Let's try it. It's not quite. Well, we'll try it. Yeah, so
hit up Twitter, hit up Twitter and ask. Somebody out there will show you how to do it.
I'm sure. Or maybe somebody listening will send me a link. Make it easy for me. Let's see. Otherwise, I got another LED project going on. It's basically just I want to replace. Remember, like a year ago, I was so happy we finally had smart lighting in the house. We were using these C/GE bulbs and LED strips and stuff. Well, all of them have been replaced now with Tasmota light bulbs. And the only thing left is the LED strip that we bought because I didn't have an easy direct replacement for it. Well, the thing I put into the hex lamp that's behind me, I've learned how to make those into just like generic LED strips. Not learned, I should say. I have come up with all of the various pieces that I needed to make them into LED strips. And I'm finally going to replace the last C/GE device we have, which is an LED strip that's attached to the back of our TV to put, like, you know, the backlighting on a TV, with a WLED device. And I've got the LED strip right here, which, you know, they're RGB LEDs. I can make them do all kinds of crazy stuff. Really, the exact same crazy stuff that the hex lamp can do. So that's my next electronics project. Oh, the other thing I wanted to talk about was this crazy thread I found on Reddit. I was never really a Reddit guy. I don't know why. It just never really appealed to me. Mainly because the first time I ever interacted with a thread on Reddit, I got flamed over some opinion I had.
But it's
'cause,
the
you know,
front
it's
page
Reddit.
of the internet.
It's the front page of the internet. Well, with Facebook being the trash fire that it is, and Twitter being the trash fire that it can sometimes be, I've started using Reddit more. I came across this thread on the Ask Reddit subreddit. I think it was the Ask Reddit subreddit. Yeah, Ask Reddit. Which is like the place that anybody can ask anything they want to, and people will answer it. And the title of this one is, "What is something ancient?" Ancient. Ancient is the word they used. That only an internet veteran can remember. Now, keep in mind the internet's only been around, what, 30 years?
Since roughly 93.
Yeah. That's when it came into the home, really, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, ancient. There's some gold in this thread. There's people talking about memes that you might remember. There's people talking about just like internet phenomenon that you might remember. There's people talking about dial-up. There's people talking about
The construction workers.
old browsers. It's just anybody who's been around the internet for more than 5 years or something, go check out this thread. It'll be in the show notes. There's some cool stuff in there. I dumped probably a dozen things into one response. Things like 56K or 14.4, which is what I started connecting to the internet with. IRC and FTP and
youngster.
stuff like that. Yeah, youngster, right? But yeah, it's a fun ride if you want to go check it out and just kind of look through, see some of the stuff people remember. And there's some things in there like Strongbad's email. Remember Strongbad?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's mentioned in there a few times. Homestar Runner.
Winamp.
Winamp is a number of times. ICQ, people talk about ICQ a lot. It's crazy. It's a fun thread if you want to go read through it. And I think that's all the chat. We have some news to talk about. The news that I haven't opened yet.
I opened it all.
I'm going to open them really quickly while I try to pretend that I have something intelligent to say that isn't just me opening up all the links for the news. Hopefully nothing
Well,
autoplays
the first
audio.
one's easy. Microsoft bought Activision for $68 billion with a B. Billion.
Hold on, wait.
Billion.
I didn't wait. You can't talk about the news yet.
Why?
You know why you can't talk about the news yet?
Oh, did you not push a button?
The funniest comment I've heard about this, there's a group of folks at Red Hat that talk about gaming, right? And not just like, oh, I was playing Call of Duty last night, but like a legitimate group of people. They call it a quote unquote community of practice that talk about gaming technologies, gaming, like competitive gaming, stuff like that. And in that group, I saw a comment that said Microsoft bought Activision for 2 Red Hats.
Yeah.
Because Red Hat was sold for $34 billion.
Yep.
I thought that was funny.
$68.7 billion. And I like this is actually the first article that I'm seeing. I didn't dig into this super deep when
I didn't really either, but I figured
but
I figured the article I should include is the announcement from Microsoft, and that's the one that's on here.
I honestly expected Microsoft to replace Activision's CEO, and apparently they're not, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
Well,
You probably have more opinions on this than I do.
The whole thing with Activision and Blizzard at this point is just the culture of just misogyny and the absolute trash fire that the whole thing is, and to not deal with it. It's one thing to. It would be one thing to not replace the CEO if he wasn't involved in it at all, but apparently, like the reports and everything that I saw, like he's directly involved with this, like from the get-go. So to
So
not replace him seems like a huge mistake to me.
so as you know, I like to play devil's advocate on some of these things, and this doesn't necessarily mean that I believe this, but so Activision themselves, this all came out almost a year ago, isn't it? It's not brand new news.
It's come out several times over the several different things have come out over the last couple of years actually.
Right. And
So it's been accumulating.
so he's still the CEO though. He wasn't fired, he didn't step down, he didn't.
No, he continued to be the CEO and just refused to step down.
Okay, so the devil's advocate piece of this is like, is there a reason for that we don't know about? Is it because he wasn't as involved as we have been led to believe? Is it because he's somehow reformed? We don't know. There's lots of stuff that we don't know, and
No,
I'm not
I
I'm not
understand.
advocating for the guy. I don't know the guy. I don't even know the details really. You may know more of the details than I do. I'm just kind of saying, like, if he has not been forced to step down until now, and Microsoft has now bought them, and Microsoft did not force him to step down, maybe there's a reason, is what I'm saying, right? Microsoft
But
doesn't
yeah,
want
I
that
mean,
bad PR.
there's always a reason, right? Well, right, but my expectation was that Microsoft has been, for all the other reasons that I don't like Microsoft, they from the perspective of culture and Xbox specifically, they seem to have a decent, very inclusive culture
Yeah.
across all of the Xbox division, and it just to see this acquisition, which was a good acquisition, but not replace certain people, like, okay, that just strikes me as wrong.
I mean, obviously, they have reason to believe that they don't need to. Whether it's because information they have that we don't, because he's been doing some other thing that is great for the company, right? And it's just a business decision. We don't know those things.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
not that I don't agree with you, right? I mean, again, I don't know all the details, but you're right. There's definitely got to be, like, there's a line you can't cross, and if he's already crossed that line, like, he should be gone. I don't know, like.
Well, we'll see what happens. Activision, Blizzard, and even King have had horrible track records, and every year or two something comes out. So I'm sure it will continue. Like, if it continues moving forward, hopefully Microsoft does something about it.
Yeah.
Because if I was as much as I love some of the games that have been published by these companies, the opportunity to work at those companies and build those games, I would no way. I wouldn't go anywhere near that because they're just,
because of that toxic culture.
The culture is completely toxic.
Yeah.
In a variety of different ways.
But I mean, they said the same thing about Apple when Jobs was at the helm, and at least for a long time. I guess he got better. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Not
that's true.
Yeah, not from like a. They basically just said he was like an asshole to work for. He was just a terrible guy. He would like scream at people. He would like threaten people. Not for the same reasons that we're talking about Activision right now, but
Yeah, and I know he shouldn't have gotten a pass on a lot of that stuff. And I know he does get a pass on some of it.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know. I'm not going to go down that road because it's the whole.
So I guess really the reason I included, one, it's big news, right? It's big news in the gaming industry.
Oh, it's huge news.
And two, I guess I'm curious what this is going to mean for gaming in the future. I've seen folks talk about how we're seeing this shift toward, like, sort of like banking has, like, the quote unquote big banks. Now we're getting to this point where we have big game developers that are just
consolidation,
that are just kind of like squashing the whole industry.
Yep.
And I don't know. I'm kind of curious what this does for the gaming industry in general, right? Like, are we going to have little indie developers and, like, a couple really big guys, and that's it?
Yes.
And is that going to be
in a nutshell? Yes.
And is that going to be a really bad thing or not?
It depends. I haven't followed what's going on the Sony side in a while because, sorry, I just couldn't get into after the PS3.
Yeah.
I couldn't deal with Sony anymore. Um, on the Xbox side, they seem to go to pretty extensive lengths. Like their ID at Xbox brand is entirely indie developers.
Yeah.
That's like their bread and butter is like they're dedicated to bringing indie developers onto the platform, which helps develop new talent, and that's amazing. I don't know if anything like that's happening on the PlayStation side. Um, so yes, there's a lot of consolidation. Um, at the same time, it depends on the game. Like yes, there's been some amazing breakaway indie games that are just beyond what you would expect. Um, but your big, multi-million dollar, franchises, that's you can't do that as an indie developer. Those are big games
Yeah.
that are,
Yeah.
you're talking major talent for that sort of thing. So I think what's going to happen there is sort of what's happening a little bit with the movie industry, which is where you've got your big industry people who are doing like the big blockbuster everything, and then you're seeing a lot of indie movies and indie everything, and that's even expanded more with things like YouTube and Twitch and all the online platforms.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It's just
wonder
more accessible now.
I wonder what this means for a company like Sony that
uh I can actually answer some of that.
oh yeah?
So from what I've read, it has actually been stated that Microsoft has not made a determination on whether or not they're going to continue creating games out of those uh, different Activision companies
Mhm.
for Sony. So the one thing that comes up is like they're not sure that they're going to continue releasing Call of Duty on PlayStation.
Right.
The one thing that they did state is that they're planning on reducing the number of releases of Call of Duty's been coming out with a new game every year,
Yeah.
and they're like, yeah, we need to slow that down. That's a little insane. Um, so they're talking about slowing down the cadence of new
Yeah.
games
Well, that's got to
from
be
things
expensive,
like Call of
right?
Duty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I
Not
mean,
just
they
that,
seem to
like
be doing.
what does it do to the fan base and like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you've
The-
always got to buy a new game and then the old it's like the Android phone problem, right? We've talked about this before, right? There's a
yeah.
new Android phone every year. The manufacturers are so sparse that the phone from last year or 2 years ago stops getting updates like a year and a half in, and then you're kind of forced to
Right.
buy a new one because you want the updates to stay patched and security fixed and whatever, right? So what happens? Like Call of Duty could be in a similar boat where fans are barely getting any use out of Call of Duty, and then there's a new one. Like that doesn't seem like a good model.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't played Call of Duty in years.
I don't think I've ever
I got
touched
fed
Call of
up with
Duty.
it.
I don't think I've ever played
But
it.
the Halo series seems to be a good one. Like that's a good model, or I think that's a good model. I know there was some controversy with the latest Halo when they showed it a couple of years ago, and it was garbage. But obviously they listened to the fans and they listened to the feedback and went, yeah, it's garbage because I've been playing Halo Infinite, and it's really good, like surprisingly good.
Yeah,
And some of the new mechanics are amazing, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
yeah,
And I'm not a huge first person shooter. Like I play them on occasion, but I'm more of a Fallout or RPGs or that sort of stuff.
yeah. I don't play first person shooters all that well on consoles just because I have trouble aiming them. I'll just
Yeah,
right out, right? Like I have trouble
I
aiming them.
I'm pretty impressed with Halo Infinite. It's pretty cool. So we'll see what they do with Activision. Personally I'm okay with fewer overall games in a year. It just in general, as long as they're high quality games that I can enjoy for a while. I'm okay with not having 90 games a year. As it is, I'll play a handful of games anyway. So
Yeah. To be honest, console gaming is mainly a thing that we keep around for the kids, and I PC game, especially
am
with
the
the
kid.
advent of VR. You know?
I am the kid.
Yeah, right. Like the Nintendo Switch, right? The kids get a ton of use out of that thing. I don't touch it that often. I've been tinkering with Animal Crossings, which sounds funny, right? But we talked about this on the last show. But we got it for the kids for Christmas, and I think I've played it more than they have. Just because it's fun to sit down and have like a very low stress game when you just need to unwind.
I kind of use my Switch like a phone, like casual gaming style.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Yeah.
But at the same time, I can play more involved games too,
Mm-hmm.
where I can just pause it and walk away because the Switch saves its state, and I can just come back to it later.
Yep. Yep.
Usually.
Usually.
Occasionally, it says, I need to update the OS on the Switch. And you're like, no, don't do it yet. I got to save my game. And it's like, no,
Nope.
I'm going to update the OS.
I'm
like,
committed.
crap.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
That's annoying. So yeah, Activision, Blizzard, and what King, I guess. They make Candy Crush and some mobile games.
$68 billion.
That's a ton of money. It's a ton of money.
That's the type of money where buying a new house is a rounding error.
2 red hats. All right. Let's see here. The next one I've got, this is less of a news article. I guess it's technically a news article. But it's more or less somebody like blasting annoyance into the internet. And this is from
Twitter? Facebook?
news.ycombinator. I don't know. This is the only place I was able to find it.
It's Hacker News, basically.
I
It's
guess
Hacker
it's
News.
Hacker News. It does say Hacker
It
News.
is Hacker News.
But I couldn't find a Hacker News link. Like if you click
No,
on this, it just takes you to itself.
News.ycombinator is Hackers News.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, anyway, then I guess it's the Hacker News that are reporting this. Let's see. The last Windows 11 update, which, by the way, you may have missed this, Jason, but I now have a Windows 11 machine. And I didn't have this problem on my Windows 11 machine. But apparently, Windows 11, the last update, as of like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, it reset a whole bunch of your browser preferences so that it forced you to use Edge, which was kind of, like not cool.
The way I'm reading it, force is a...
Oh, yeah, it's not forced. It changed the defaults. It changed the defaults.
Yeah.
It mainly, like, this is a trick that not only Microsoft, but some ISPs pulled back in the day. They would set your default browser, hoping you wouldn't notice, in order to try to get you to use their browser. Now, the browser wars are over, in my opinion, right? They're like, people have made their choices. They're going to use what browser they're going to use. But this is annoying, right? To change the default browser from whatever the user is using back to Edge. And of course, people are like, oh, Microsoft is pulling their crap again. They're trying to force us to use their crappy browser because they want us to use it, blah, 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 blah. I don't know if that's really... This could easily be a mistake. Because like I said, my Windows 11 machine updated just yesterday and did not have this happen. So... Whoever
wrote this is young.
Yeah.
I mean, I was around when Microsoft went through the antitrust case and the whole premise of default browser and default this and default that came out.
Yeah.
And even since then, this is not the first time that Microsoft has done this.
You're right.
This happens every couple of years. It just does.
This blew up in a few places, and I thought it was worth mentioning. Just one, because, we've been around this industry long enough to make commentary on it, and, maybe we've got listeners that aren't. But, I don't think this is as big a deal as some people are making out of it. And like I said, either they backpedaled, or I was lucky and it didn't happen to me. Or maybe it didn't happen to everybody. I don't know. But
it's probably a common, if your computer is running this with this combination of, and this setting isn't set and blah, 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 and you have auto updates, there's probably some switch somewhere when it goes, oh, okay, I'll just do this.
Another bot in the chat.
Not anymore.
Goodbye, bot. I guess it's a sign of our success, right? That we have bots in the chat on YouTube now.
Maybe, except that they're all Russian bots and stuff
We
is
don't.
going on with Ukraine. So I'm just going to go and say that it's just general
Oh,
bottiness because of
could
all
be.
that nonsense.
Could be. I remember I was watching. I think it was a SpaceX launch. No, it was a NASA thing. It's a couple years ago. I forget what it even was now. But I was watching it. They were live streaming it on YouTube, and there was this bot that kept showing up that was just spamming swastikas in the stupid chat. I'm like, really? Like, who
Yep.
on this planet thinks that the Nazis were a good thing? That we need to spam the chat with swastikas?
The Nazis,
Yeah, the Nazis, the ones that are still around.
the modern day Nazis.
Yeah,
Yes.
freaking crazy stuff.
So-
Anyway, we're going to move away from the Nazis and we're going to talk about Apple. This is from The Verge, and the topic, or not the topic, the title is Apple might let you use Face ID with a mask in the next iOS update. This is
So
this
this
sound
one
funny.
confused me.
This is going to sound
confused
funny.
me.
Okay, go
Go
ahead. I was going to say
No,
this.
no.
This is going to sound funny, but this is one of the most annoying things with having to wear a mask in certain places is that my phone doesn't unlock when I look at it. And
So
I've thought to myself several times, why have both Google and Apple not solved this problem? Well, I guess they finally are. And
you
well,
say finally, I've been able to unlock my phone wearing a mask for
aha,
months and months and
Aha.
months. And I know there's the
read the
aha,
article.
and the aha is that I have an Apple Watch.
Yes.
And that is what's doing it. So
Right.
my Apple Watch, when it recognizes that it can't fully, it's funny because if I cover my face, like and my eyes are showing, and it can't fully detect who I am, but my watch is on,
Yeah.
it'll unlock. If I
The-
cover the sensor so it can't see any of me,
Yeah.
it won't unlock.
So
So there was some of that being done already.
the article suggests that if you have an Apple device and you have an iWatch or an Apple Watch, and it detects a face, not even your face, not even a facsimile of your face, but a face, it'll unlock.
No, I
If your watch is present, if your watch is like, if I picked up your phone and tried to face unlock it and I
Right.
was standing right next to you, it would probably unlock for me. Now, I haven't tested that. That's what the article insinuates. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's true or not.
that was
but-
as of iOS 14.5.
right. So there has been work done for folks that are fully bought into the Apple ecosystem to be able to unlock their device. I always thought this was like they weren't willing to make the change because the pandemic was temporary and
No,
they weren't going to. But I think it's more or less, it's harder to truly identify you as you if they can't see your mouth.
it's not as accurate. And
Right.
the article
Right.
actually goes into this, like
Right.
that when you switch this on now to use Face ID with a mask, it literally tells you this is not as secure
Right.
as Face ID without a mask.
Right.
Are you sure you want to do this?
And I always wondered, right? So I'm, as you, anyone who's watching the live stream can tell, I'm in the midst of growing a beard, right? It has not impacted the Face ID on my phone at all. It's just like, yep,
What?
that's still Nate.
Yep, and you could take your glasses off, put your glasses
right.
on.
You can change your
That
hair. You
doesn't
can do all
impact
kinds
it.
of stuff.
What-
Why is the
what's
mask
interesting-
such a big deal? Does it change the shape of
What-
your face enough? Like, I don't know.
What I find interesting, and you can try this, if you put on sunglasses, dark sunglasses, so you can't see your eyes,
Yes.
your phone will unlock no problem. If you put on glasses or take your glasses off and close your eyes, your phone will not unlock.
Oh, that's interesting. I've noticed that for some reason
So-
mine, if I'm laying down, if I'm laying in bed, checking the news or whatever, it won't unlock. I don't know why.
So if you knock the guy out, just put sunglasses on him and Face ID will work.
There you go. There you go. If you knock out the person you're trying to impersonate and put sunglasses
Yep.
on them. Yeah, mine, I don't, like I said, with my Android phones, as long as I got a clear view of my face, right, like I had to mess with the angle, it would identify me in almost any situation. With my iPhone, it seems a little more finicky, and I don't know if that's because they have leaned more toward the security side. That's possible. They want a more positive identification, or if it's just a different in the way the identification is working. I don't know. I'm not trying to say like, oh, Android Face Unlock is better than iOS. I'm just saying that I have found more situations where my iOS device cannot identify my face and unlock, even though they've been doing it the right way for longer than Android has, than the Android devices that I used in the past. I don't know.
Yeah, the only problems I've had with Face ID are when I'm not paying attention to it and it's trying to identify me.
Yeah.
Because again, if I'm not looking at the screen, it won't unlock.
You know what?
Unless I'm wearing sunglasses.
To be honest, that was the most annoying feature of my Pixel device, was that if it got a glimpse of my face, it would unlock. So if I'd like pick up my phone and go like past my face, just like if the front of the phone could see my face for a millisecond as I was like putting it into my pocket or whatever, it would unlock.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the iOS device, whether it's intentional or not, doesn't seem to have that problem.
The only other problem I have with Face ID is and again it's when wearing a mask. If I go into an application that's also using Face ID,
Yeah.
so if I need to check my bank account or something, my bank happens to have Face ID.
Yeah.
If I'm wearing my mask, again, even though I have the watch on, Face ID in an application won't use the watch, so it won't unlock. That only seems to work on the locks on the like when the phone itself is locked.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that they have to write into the application to make that work or not. I have no idea, but
I don't know. Maybe it's a security level thing.
yeah, it happens once in a while. It's not,
Yeah.
I don't. It's not something I deal with every day, so it's not a big deal. But
Yeah. So anyway, sounds like iOS maybe it's in the beta. It's in the 15.4 beta. That you can make it identify you even while wearing a mask, but it lowers the security threshold or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, maybe a good thing,
Right.
maybe not. Worth talking about.
15.4 beta out yet?
This implied that it was. Maybe it's not out for end users, but it's out for testers.
No, it is out. Okay, it's finally
There you
out.
go. Maybe you can try it out. Let us know. Of course, you have an Apple Watch. It's going to ruin the whole
I'll
experience.
have to take my watch off.
Take off your watch. Put it in the other room.
I mean, I knew a new beta was coming out soon. I just didn't know it was out yet. What else we got?
The next article is from Inc. Is it incorporated? I don't know. Inc.com, inc.com. And it's suspiciously titled, Google just gave you the best reason yet to finally quit using Chrome. Now,
I don't use Chrome. Let's move on.
I'm going to be honest. I didn't read the whole article. I wanted to, but I didn't. It's all about cookies and third-party cookies and Flock, FLOC,
Yeah, so-
which was like this new thing that Google was going to do. So what it comes down to is Google has a vested interest in keeping third-party cookies turned on because they want the ad revenue from being able to identify people based on their third-party cookies. So instead of but a lot of other browsers are like, we're going to stop using what?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
Not quite. The vested interest is they have a vested interest in tracking people.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Doesn't have to be through third-party cookies.
Right.
And in fact, they had come out and said we're going to get rid of third-party cookies until and I guess what came back was I don't know whether it was them or somebody else who was like, you have all sorts of technologies that you can use because you have your own browser to continue to track people, and if you get rid of third-party cookies, that kills all of your competition. That's illegal.
Right.
And that was a major problem for them.
This is such a weird problem, right? It's like we want to increase privacy for the user, but we can't because we have a thing that gives us an unfair advantage.
So they had come out with something called Flock, which was where was this thing?
Yeah, I can't remember what it stands for either.
Federated Learning of Cohorts.
Yeah, which basically
learning of cohorts.
Which basically, instead of reading third-party cookies directly, it grouped you into things.
It grouped you with a bunch of other people who were interested in the thing that you were interested in.
Which is kind of the same thing.
Through magic.
Through magic, yeah.
So I have just learned today what flock is, although I've seen the term like
Yeah.
a week or two ago when there was a big announcement that Google was getting rid of flock and they were going to use topics now, and I went, "The
Yeah.
hell is flock?" So now Google is getting rid of flock, and they're going to move to something called topics. So instead of grouping
Yeah.
you with other people, they're just going to put you in a group about a specific topic with other people.
Which is the same freaking thing.
But
Yeah.
they're going to give you the ability to take yourself out of the topic. This is such nonsense and such BS.
It really is. It feels like Google has just put themselves in a bad position because they own a browser.
Yeah, basically.
Like it's they need to spin off Chrome into some third party, and then they won't have this problem anymore. Maybe they can't do that because it's
The article's so funny though, because it's like no one likes flock because it's not more private, and because tracking happens anyway in your browser, and you know it's not private, and you can figure things out because you're grouped with other people. And now they're going to use topics instead, and that's so much better. Like, but
yeah.
that's the same damn thing.
Yeah, but I
Just
mean, the
gave it
whole
a different
point,
name.
the point of the article is that they think it's bad. Otherwise, they wouldn't say it's another reason to leave Chrome.
I guess I don't
Yeah.
know.
So, folks, use a browser that lets you turn off third-party cookies and be done with it. Switch to Brave, switch to Firefox, switch to Safari, anything.
It's funny that the article doesn't mention Firefox as one of those, and I'm pretty sure you can do. I mean,
I think you can turn off third-party cookies in
I'm
Firefox.
almost positive.
Firefox is probably one of the most privacy-aware browsers out there.
yeah, it's
Like, not
this thing
out of the
blocks-
box. Brave is out of the box. Brave's whole point is to protect privacy.
right.
But Firefox gives you all the tools to turn that stuff off because Mozilla is all about user privacy. It's one of the reasons they're still my primary browser. I use Brave for stuff that needs Chrome now, but otherwise it's Firefox.
And
I
I
use
don't need
Firefox.
64 gigs of RAM to run it.
Right. Certain things just work better in Chrome, even for work, which is weird. But so I just keep both browsers. I use Brave and I use Firefox. So anyway, yeah, topics. It's
Yeah,
the
so
new
get rid of
flock.
Chrome.
Topics of the new flock. All right, so this last one's from you, right? From this Moxie thing.
Yeah. So this takes some explaining. So
Okay,
and
but I'm out of beer. I
and
don't have any more beer. I need another beer.
Unfortunately, your email address is the one associated with the podcast. So enjoy the flames. So I'll start this off very non-confrontationally.
Do I need-
NFTs suck, and they're garbage, and it's a waste of time.
That's not confrontational. Where's this going?
So Moxie Marlinspike, who was the brains behind Signal, and who is pretty big in the crypto world.
Okay.
Crypto meaning cryptography, by the way, not this bullshit
What?
Bitcoin and
No,
NFT stuff.
crypto means fake money.
Yeah. It's funny because the very first part of his little blog entry here is like explaining that crypto means cryptography, and that's why he doesn't really follow this new crypto thing, which is NFTs and coins.
Yeah, I was in a meeting this week where someone talked about crypto, and they said crypto as in cryptography, not in money, and I'm like what does it say about the state of the world when I assumed they meant cryptocurrency?
I know.
When I
right?
know better.
Yeah. Especially given the context of where you are and what's
Yeah.
going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, but you can't walk away from that because like there's YouTube apparently is talking about there's rumor that YouTube is going to start dealing with NFTs. Twitter just rolled out NFT support. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
So-
you can now use NFTs for your freaking profile picture.
Yeah, which is whatever.
Anyway,
So-
I've got feelings about NFT. Go ahead and talk about
Yeah.
your thing.
So basically, what this article that he wrote lays out is kind of this whole thing called Web3, which the whole crypto NFT movement has labeled Web3.
Yeah.
The idea being that Web 1 was this whole decentralized, everybody runs their own server, runs their own web servers, can put their own content out, whatever.
Yeah.
Web 2.0 is where everything consolidated to the middle. And you had providers now that provide things.
Yeah.
We've gotten to the point where we've got your AWS and your Azure and your your various different services that supply these things, because as it turns out, most people don't want to run their own servers.
Yeah, it's weird.
Let somebody else be the sysadmin, damn it, because this shit's hard.
It is.
So
It is hard. We just
so-
talked about that for an hour and a half.
Right. So the Web3 movement seems to be a lot of people who are jumping up and down and going, we're taking that Web 2.0 stuff and we're bringing it back the way it should be. It should be decentralized, and we're going to decentralize the web. And the
Weird.
rest of Moxie's article here basically lays out all of the stuff that he did to figure out what NFTs are, how they work, etc. And, kind of dig into this whole decentralization. And it turns out, yeah, that's not true at all. Web3 is as centralized as Web 2. The only piece of it that is quote unquote decentralized is the blockchain itself, which is kind of a yes, NFTs use blockchain.
Yeah.
And the only reason that they use blockchain is because there happens to be some impetus behind it. There's money involved there.
Yeah.
People are kind of excited about the blockchain.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, exactly what's happening can be done without it centralized in a significantly securer way than what's being done with blockchain. So one of the experiments that he did, which I thought was hilarious, if you're not familiar with NFTs, they're non-fungible tokens.
Yep.
Basically, you're creating your own cryptocurrency one piece at a time. So you have your NFT, and yes, before people jump all over, I'm aware that NFTs can be more than just art. The fact is that the absolute mass majority of NFTs right now are
Art.
stupid little pictures of apes and other nonsense.
Yeah.
By the way, the NFT itself that you create has zero art in it. There is no art in that NFT, because if you were to store the actual piece of artwork that you're calling your NFT on the blockchain, it would be prohibitively expensive.
Okay.
So what they've decided instead is that what goes into the blockchain is a record that says Nate owns this
Yeah.
piece of art that is at this link.
That's how I pictured that it must have worked. It's
Yeah,
similar.
so-
It's similar to, and I don't want to derail you because I have
Yep.
I have feelings about this, but it's similar to the deed to my house is on record at the courthouse. They don't have a representation of my house at the courthouse. They have the deed
There,
that says it is
Yes,
owned by
correct.
so and so.
you
Right.
are correct. However, there is a massive, massive difference.
Okay.
You're in your house, right?
Yep. I can physically see and touch my house.
You can physically see and
I
touch
can
your house.
physically
You can
protect
do-
my house if needed.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I see
Okay.
where you're going with this.
Your NFT exists on a web server
Right.
somewhere,
Which is not yours.
which is almost guaranteed to not be yours. In fact, the vast majority are somebody else's. They're
Yeah.
like, OpenSea. Actually, I'm sorry, not even OpenSea. OpenSea just holds the record, or gives you the ability to see the record. So, as an example, what Moxie did was he created an NFT, registered it or whatever nonsense you have to do to make it a real NFT, put it on the blockchain that pointed at his server.
Yeah.
Where he had the actual JPEG or GIF or whatever it was that was
whatever
the
he
NFT.
quote unquote owned. Yeah.
And then through the magic of technology that has existed since the 90s, he went into his web server and said, okay, if the person who's viewing this NFT is coming from this website, what one of them is OpenSea and I forget what the other one's called. If they're coming from this website, show this image. If they're
Yeah.
coming from the other website, show this image. And if they're coming from neither, show a poop emoji.
Nice.
And it is, the whole thing was it was just an example. He was just like,
Yeah.
I just want to show that you can do this. So your pointer points at something that you most likely don't have control over,
Uh-huh.
that can be changed underneath you, whether you know it or not. And by the way, that thing that you went to OpenSea to buy may not actually be there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same argument for, I bought a CD on Amazon, not a CD. I bought a
Correct.
song on, Song Service X, and if Song Service X vanishes tomorrow, I don't actually have that song anymore. I don't have access to it anymore. Except now it's a little different because now, like, there was no expectation that you owned that song. Right? There was no
Right.
ownership to that. Now there is. Now there's that you own this because it's in the blockchain. But if that
Well,
thing, if the data
then
goes
there's
away,
right. Then there's the question of what does ownership mean?
right,
Because
right,
I just took a screenshot of that, and now I have a copy of it too. So
right.
what does that mean? And can you
It's
do
more
anything?
like
But
rights, right? I mean, so
but
if you take this back to the very basics of ownership, right? Going back to the example of the record for my deed is on record at the courthouse, right?
mhm,
Um, if I'm trying to think if I abandon my house, if I leave it, if I go live somewhere else, right? Someone could come and effectively take this house, right? They could come live here, if they could get into the place and whatever they wanted to maintain it and stuff like that. Even though the record still says I own it, right? But that doesn't mean they own it. It's legally I still own it. Now, yes,
right.
this gets complicated with things like squatters' rights and all that stuff, right? But like at its bare minimum, right? If I own a thing legally, if I own this phone legally, but somebody pickpockets me and takes my phone, yes, technically I still own it. It's mine legally, and if I catch you, I have legal rights to take it back from you.
Yep.
And I can tell the cops you stole my phone. But if I never catch you and never see you again, you've got my phone. Doesn't matter if I own it, right? It's really the same problem.
Yeah, this somewhat, but it gets worse.
Okay,
So remember that
go
whole
down the rabbit
crypto
hole.
conversation, cryptography versus
Yeah,
crypto NFT
yeah,
coins. So it's the blockchain, and it's cryptographically signed, and there's all this cryptography involved in it, and all these big machines to do the calculations to generate all the hashes and everything else. Turns out, the blockchain itself that creates the hash to cryptographically sign the chain itself is about the only cryptography involved in this entire thing.
okay,
So and the information that is stored in the blockchain is a link, and that's it.
yeah,
There's no and probably some ownership information, but there's no hash or anything that any sort of metadata that identifies what should be at the end of that link.
so you can change it.
Right. He said that, and again, Moxie is a crypto guy, but the lack of cryptography in general used, the lack of security, SSL, et cetera, in general used across every aspect of this is, is just enormous. And it gets worse because the way that the system is built, you can kind of manipulate it. So the chain it's Ethereum based chain that they use, which has contracts in it. So one of the things that you can do with contracts is write code to do different things with it. And as I can find the link to it, but as something that came out today, I think it was today. There's somebody wrote a contract into an NFT that if you interact with the NFT in any way, it steals everything in your wallet. It just transferred it all to somebody else.
That's nice.
And you think, well, okay, well, we'll just mark those as bad, and we'll put something in there that looks for that and make sure that people don't touch it. Except that you don't have to. They're sending this to people and just putting it in other folks' wallet. You can I don't know how exactly it works, but you can put an NFT in somebody's wallet and there's no interaction needed with them.
Yeah.
So this is stuff that's happening right now, like they're stealing all this, they're stealing all sorts of stuff. There's privacy concerns because NFTs are revealing information about people, IP addresses and locations and everything else. One of the things that he goes into is he says, one of the things that was super exciting for creators was the ability to get royalties on their um, on their
Their NFT.
creation.
Yeah.
But one of his arguments about distributed versus centralized is that in a distributed system you have to have groups that basically go over and decide this is what the protocol is that we're going to use, and all agree that to use that protocol, and then get everybody to start using it. Well, turns out the protocol that's out there that's being used for NFTs doesn't include royalties.
That's funny.
Good luck changing that.
Yeah, right.
So
Right.
platforms like OpenSea, which can iterate left, right, and sideways, built it into their platform. So if you'd like royalties, use OpenSea. They have it built into their platform. But that's centralized. That's not distributed. So,
Right.
and again, we go down
Right.
the path of all that other stuff. So there's apparently major, we're just seeing the beginning of this, but there's major problems with the security around NFTs in general.
Surprise.
It's not decentralized at all. So that whole thing is just bunk. And what's
Yeah,
funny
no,
is that
I've seen that too in my own investigations into what the hell the metaverse is. There's all kinds of things, like there's a service called Decentraland, which is like, it's in the name, decentralized. It's not decentralized. It's a service run by a company in which you can be, but the decentralization is blockchain.
right.
So anyway, I think I interrupted your thought there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of really really sketchy nonsense going on.
Yeah, so I was having a conversation. In fact, it was with Mark, because we've been having conversations on this show about metaverses and ownership and what that could be and what maybe it should be, and that's slowly. I've been trying to start. I don't want to call it a movement, but a group of people at Red Hat that are interested in the same thing, right? And that's very much in its infancy. I don't know if it'll ever be anything more than just a couple of geeks talking about metaverse. But these are... I was having a conversation with Mark just earlier today, to get back to the point, that NFTs are dumb. That's his opinion, right? NFTs are stupid. And to me, though, if you parallel NFTs and cryptocurrency to real world ownership of things and currency, it's the same stuff. It's like a direct parallel, right? So you can...
You're gonna piss off all the crypto people by saying that, but yes.
I think it's a direct parallel. I mean, maybe it's because I don't know something. It's very possible. Yeah. It's just something there's something I don't know. It's a very similar, and I know this is not a one-for-one thing, but a Bitcoin, a coin on the blockchain, right, is, you could say, equivalent to money in your wallet, right? It's not physically money in your wallet, but it is currency, right? So people who want currency do things shady to try to remove the currency from your possession and get it into theirs.
Yep.
And that's the same thing is happening. I compared it to the people who were selling toast that looked like Jesus Christ on eBay back in the day, right? Remember when all those things came up, like, oh, I spilled tar in my driveway and it has a similarity to Michelangelo, right? So they sell it on eBay for millions of dollars, right? It's the same bullshit. It's the same thing, in my opinion anyway. It's the same thing with NFTs. I made a gorilla. I made a funny meme, whatever. I've made it an NFT. I can now sell it, right? And the description that you have right now of how these work, right? It sounds like there are a lot of gaps in how that ownership chain works and how, you can actually tie, and like, what does ownership actually mean there, right? And in my opinion, and again, I don't know if you listened to the show where Mark and I were talking about the metaverse, but I really think that what we need going forward for a quote-unquote metaverse and NFTs and ownership and whatever is true decentralization, like the original web was designed. You can run your own server. That server can run your own world. Your own world has ownership and things and whatnot within it. You actually can go like touch the server that it's on, or it's on a cloud provider or something, right? But you have administrative rights to that thing, right? And I think that makes it, one, truly decentralized, and two, it addresses some of the stuff that you just brought up, right? the NFT that lives on a server somewhere is actually a server that I control, a server that I have ownership over the data that's on it, right? But you're right. That brings up the same problems that are called out in this article. Servers are hard to run. They're hard to run securely. They're hard for just anybody to go out and operate, right? So,
Yep.
yes, it leads to the same, okay, you've got all the freedom in the world. It's like being able to drive a car, right? I can drive a car and go anywhere I want. But if I'm really bad at driving a car, I might die doing it. Right?
Right. And to be clear, like, there have been companies that are like, we would like to be completely open. We'll let you, you can hook your server up to us, and we're going to give you all the freedom and everything else. And they start that way, and then they look and they go, we've have, 5 million customers, and 2 of them are using this.
Right.
And we're spending, how many thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars every year maintaining the code that supports this for 2 people. Okay, so we're shutting down that service. Everything's centralized now. Like, just live with it.
Right.
And you got 2 people at the edge
Right.
going, no! But they're not going to be listened to because
there are
it's 2 people.
4,900,909. Yeah, right.
Right. And I think that's, that's where we've gotten today, because yes, you and I could sit here and run our own servers. I've been running my own server for years and years and years.
Right.
I don't have any plans to stop. I enjoy it. If it died tomorrow, I'd build a new one. Fine.
Right.
But my wife wouldn't do that. Most of my kids wouldn't do that.
You're right.
My parents wouldn't do that. Most of my neighbors won't do that.
It's the same problem with decentralized social media.
Right.
Like, at its core, it's a really good idea. It means you get
Yes.
ownership of your data. It means that you can block and ban people. You can live by your own rules and whatever. It's responsibility, though. And it's to do it right takes a little bit of skill. And I don't know what percentage, let's say 90% of people don't have that skill.
Right.
And never will, and have no interest in it.
Yeah. And of the 10% left that do have that skill, 90% of them have no interest whatsoever in doing this.
Right.
So now you're left with like a handful of people who want all the power and
Yep.
and
Yep.
like, by all means, I'd love to give it to them, but
yeah, you've got people like me that are still holding on to their diaspora pod, even though nobody that I care about is there. But someday they might be, so I keep running it.
right, and that's one of those things. Like, Facebook could integrate the ability to work with diaspora, no problem.
They don't
But
care.
again,
They don't want to.
you're one of, they've got like several billion people on the platform now. You're like, less than 1% of 1%.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not worth the money.
Yeah. Yeah. But, it's, if, using that example, if the folks that write diaspora instead looked at it the other direction and integrated with Facebook, if Facebook made APIs available to let you do that, right? That'd be a different story, right? You'd have passionate people that want to run a project, that integrate with the big companies, that enable people like me to run their own pod and integrate with people that don't care, right? It's not going to happen. Today, anyway, it's not going to happen with Facebook, because Facebook doesn't expose those APIs. Facebook doesn't make that possible because they don't care, right? And it might even cost them money. I don't know, right? But if we lived in a world where people could get that to happen, like, that may actually be a possibility.
Not to defend Facebook, but it may not even be that they don't care. It's just, it's not cost. There's no
right, but
no advantage to doing it. It's not going to make them any money.
Imagine if we lived in a world where the web protocol was built with social media in mind, and all the protocols that made communication amongst web servers and whatnot possible included some way to federate social media. And this is just like a far-fetched example, right? And when Facebook was implemented, it implemented those protocols because that was the way people were doing it.
Yep.
Right? Now, diaspora, Mastodon, whoever else would be able to say, okay, I just implement the same federation protocols and bam, works. Right. Now imagine if Web3 were designed that way, with metaverses and NFTs and blockchains in mind, And all the protocols that are being used on Web3 already out of the box included all those things, right? We're at that point now.
No, hang on, because go read the article that's posted, because this is exactly what Moxie talks about.
Okay.
Yes, they're using public protocols that have been ratified and everybody can hook into, but true, like today's development cycles, we spend all of this time with agile and everything else trying to crunch it down so that we can iterate as fast as humanly possible and create new things rapidly.
Yeah.
You can't do that with a public protocol. You can't. Period. End of story.
Because you can't change the protocol rapidly.
You can't. Right. Exactly.
So you have to think of everything on day one, is what you're saying.
Yes.
And if it wasn't thought of on day one, to get it changed is a pain in the butt.
Right. For something like TCP/IP has survived because it's extremely low level.
Yeah.
When you're getting into things like blockchain, they're much higher level, and you're trying to build application level stuff into it, where things like royalties and everything else, like if you don't think about it, or nobody has thought about it until that's already distributed and out there, like good luck changing that. I mean, look at what happens with Bitcoin. I think my camera just died for some reason.
Yeah, it did.
No, my camera's working. I can see myself.
No, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, it's acting like there's bandwidth problems, and we should probably wrap up anyway if you want to finish your thought.
So I forget what I was saying.
Your camera doesn't work. That's the problem.
Yeah, my camera doesn't work. So basically, like, at using a low-level protocol, you can get away with sort of building on that. But when you start building more application-aware stuff into it, you hit a point where you have to put the protocol out. And look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin, it took them a very long time to make simple change. I mean, there's some of them are controversial, but simple changes to the protocol to move Bitcoin forward, and it takes them a year or more to get that pushed out. And there's relatively few users that actually matter when it comes to pushing that protocol out.
Yeah.
Expand that to a much larger set of people, and you hit a point that you just can't.
Yeah. I guess the question I have is, does that mean we shouldn't try? You know what I mean?
No.
Like, does that mean this is all doomed to failure at the start? Or
no, I just think I think the whole idea behind the way the NFTs work and the money that's being thrown around at it right now is just stupid. I think
it kind of is.
If you buy an NFT and you lose it and you lose your money, like sorry, you deserve to.
Currently, it's a new fad, and we're gonna see it.
Hey, I'm back.
I mean, just like we were talking about earlier, right? It's the new thing that technology has not caught up to yet. And we will, it'll stabilize, and then maybe it'll survive and it'll be a usable thing. Maybe it won't.
The bigger problem with current blockchain technology is the absolutely immense, ridiculous amount of power required to keep the blockchain up and running and calculate the hashes.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, to the point where there are brownouts in areas.
Yep.
Governments are shutting down areas of electricity specifically to stop these things from running.
Yeah.
That's a major problem. Like there's a lake somewhere where they set up a crypto pool, and they actually raised the temperature. A massive lake. They raised the temperature of the lake because of this thing running. Like,
wow.
What the hell?
Like, yeah, that seems like a bad thing. You want to talk about climate change? There's climate change.
So, anyway,
I wonder if the inventor of Bitcoin is looking back like, why did I do that? Or is he like, yeah, this is awesome. This is the chaos I was hoping for.
Oh, who knows? Who knows? So, all right, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy stuff, and it ties in very well to the metaverse conversation we had a couple episodes ago. I don't know where else to go from there without drawing the show out for another hour, which we don't want to do because we're at like 3 hours now. It's time to stop. It's time to end. I'm gonna have to up our subscription on Riverside to accommodate whatever our next show is about because we're gonna run out of time. All right. So anyway, this has been a great episode, I think, on both sides, both the A part and the B part. If you've listened to just the B part, you should go back and listen to A, because we had a great conversation with Eric about basically the last decade or 2 decades of sysadminning and how things have changed over time. And it was a lot of fun to go back and talk about. So, but with that, I think we're going to call it a night. Let me find my notes here that have
It's a night.
the closing stuff in. It's a night. It's totally a night. Right. So if you want to watch us live, you can do so on the Twitches or the YouTubes or even the Facebooks. Just look us up, Iron Sysadmin Podcast, on the second and fourth Thursday of every month, give or take. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter or Facebook, find out when we're going to go live, stuff like that. You can find us wherever you would normally find podcasts. But if you're listening to us, you probably already know that. Yeah, I'm tired, and I feel like I'm having trouble even reciting all this stuff. Folks, I think it's been a good one. If you want to support the show, you can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. You can find links to all the stuff on IronSysAdmin.com. And you got any last words, Jason?
Send all angry emails for about NFTs and crypto in general. Go to Nate.
No, I'm gonna wait. People know your Twitter handle by now. They can go attack you there.
Hey, go for it. That stuff doesn't bother me at all. So have fun.
Go attack the Xenophage on Twitter.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let me get back to my OBS page here so we can actually close the show up. Where is it? Here it is. All right, folks, have a good one. We'll catch you on the next show.
Good night.